This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series is brought to you by Malwa Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. For oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec, visit www.malwa-transport.ca. And for an expert and professional trucking insurance firm specializing in property and casualty insurance solutions for freight across Quebec, Canada, and the United States, visit www.transportexpert.com. Good evening and good morning, race fans, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome back to TRTN for today's coverage of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League here in Season 2, Round 6, firmly into the second half of the championship now. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here in Austin, Texas, on the outskirts of a fantastic city indeed, right here at the home of the United States Grand Prix. The Circuit of the Americas was founded in 2010 to become the new home of Formula One in the United States. It's 20 turns and 3.4 miles of FIA Grade 1. Outside of Formula One, it also hosts a myriad of races on 2 and 4 wheels. The United States Grand Prix for motorcycle Grand Prix racing, for example, in MotoGP. It also hosts endurance races under the FIA World Endurance Championship, having returned since 2024 as the Lone Star Le Mans. NASCAR races out of here in both the Cup and O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, formerly the Xfinity Series, as part of the Duramax Grand Prix and Focus Health 250. GT World Challenge America continues to race out of here and has done so since 2013. The Trans Am Series returned for 2015 at the Austin Speed Tour, and Moto America has the Superbikes at Texas, which has picked back up after the COVID-19 pandemic, with 2022 onwards being a continual run of that race indeed. Well, it's going to be an interesting point here in the championship, taking a look at where we find ourselves with only 3 rounds left to go, this being one. Among them, Snetterton thereafter and Indianapolis thereafter that. We find ourselves on an augmented set of rules into this particular round of the championship. Now, the major reasoning behind that, you'll see we're without our 2 qualifying sessions. We just have simply one 20-minute qualifier and 2 races paired up back-to-back that'll run off of that qualifying grid. Now, one of the major reasons behind this sudden change in the rule set is namely for the track itself. This was an executive decision brought forth by the folks at Race Control for Competizione Performance League, as they ratified the point that it is going to be incredibly hard to lay in times with only 10 minutes to play with at a track that is already large, like the Circuit of the Americas, and for that matter as well, track limits at this track, especially in this game, are incredibly tough to match, even in the titular GT4. So that was their reasoning behind such a rule change. We currently find ourselves with about 16 minutes left to go in free practice, and before we get on to the point of that singular 20-minute block of qualifying later on today, let's take a look at how far we've come in the championship. Well, entering its 6th round here, we do find ourselves with a very interesting scope of things at the forefront. LeBay leading, but again by a thin margin to David Tanguay in 2nd. Vincent Simard most recently promoted to 3rd place in the championship. Right in 4th place ahead of Richard Cecil on your screens at the moment to make the back of the top 5. George Todd in 6th place, only a single point behind. In 7th place, Giovanni Badiali returns to the grid after his last round appearance in round 4 gave him a race win. He took hiatus through round 5. The Italian returns now 7th in the championship, still ahead of Kevin Quain in 8th, Clinton Bourne in 9th, and Timo de Tosto in 10th place. As we take a look around the grid at the moment, we see we're on board with Richard Cecil. Plenty of drivers out on track at the moment, and a few new drivers for this round of the championship, among them Cal Ford in the number 484. Now, we've had a promising list of new entries into the championship in the last couple of weeks. One that definitely sprung to mind was the 74 of Sean Cox with BMW. Had a decent time of things in Valencia, a bit of a series of ups and downs, and then picked things up in the sort of opening round of the World Series that sadly was forced to be delayed until after this week, I believe, because of this Saturday slot going over to the Console Endurance Series. We'll be going live to the 6 hours of Monza later on in this coming up weekend. We're about to see, though, the number 5 down towards the line here, Richard Cecil with Aston Martin. Down towards the line, then the baseline time, I should say, here for the first flying lap of free practice thus far, 2 minutes 19.247. Now, we'll get on to the discussions in the upcoming block of qualifying into what those predictions are going to be looking like over the course of this quali session to follow. Oh, this has been quite a crowd splitter, and that seems to be a bit of a routine case at the Circuit of the Americas, much like many tracks we've discussed in the past and many tracks we've actually had very recently on our broadcast itinerary. We're in fact reeling away from what was a fantastic double stint round over on TRC. We just came from Paul Ricard, another crowd splitter circuit, and that gave us two fantastic races to talk about. So I have every thought in my mind, I'm on good authority to believe we could be seeing very much so the same story here in the Competizione Performance League. The Circuit of the Americas, track limits are very tough. We are very much treading on foreign ground here in these GT4s. They weren't designed to be here, neither was this track ever designed to accommodate them. So really, it's been a case of perseverance that's ever brought the GT4s into the veil of the Circuit of the Americas this time around. We see new fastest time by Clinton Bourne, 2:17.910. So before we get on towards qualifying, in looking at it right now, about 13.5 minutes time, let's get on to the discussion of A, the previous wins over the course of the series, and then B, the balance of performance. Well, as we saw in round 5, it was back to business for Christian Lebay. Only the single win by Giovanni Battiali has split up what has set to have been before that point a 100% win rate for the Canadian talent and defending Season 1 GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series champion. Looking into the balance of performance for today, we do find ourselves with only really much to talk about up front there. Alpine and Porsche, the two featherweights, punished for just existing on this track. So it seems 18 and 20 kilos added on board to the 718 in the A110. BMW gaining only 2 kilos. So for Sean Cox, he can breathe a sigh of relief knowing he's not really getting the real sharp end of it in BOP today. We still do see, though, Aston Martin lose a single kilo. Chevrolet, despite what has been an era of dominance in this championship, still find themselves being niced under BOP. It simply does not make any more sense here, how BOP seems to be able to reward a car that doesn't need any hand-holding. Nonetheless, the Camaro will lose 15 kilos coming into this round. McLaren lose 26, and AMG lose double Chevrolet's tow there, and they get a whole 30 kilos shed away from the AMG. So there'll be a lot of eyes resting on some performances, for example, out of drivers like Kevin Quain, who we saw to be a pretty solid talent in his own respect back in Valencia, was well within his chances to take Mercedes' first ever win in this series. There was definitely some high hopes riding upon that. There's nothing to say that he can't replicate some of that magic from last week. You see here the 607 down towards the line. Only two Astons, two Chevrolets. They've been the two main manufacturers fighting and clashing heads throughout this series. Aston Martin currently third and fourth, courtesy of Richard Cecil and Byron Forrest, Clinton Bourne, and now Christian Lebay leading the session. Latest time than a 2:16.507 in the 119. But taking a look into it here, Giovanni Battiali does return, of course, to the grid. One of the major announcements then to have come out of round 6. Of course, round 4's race winner is showing great signs of promise today. And as we saw ourselves, at least before we went live, on the pre-race practice sessions, he is looking upwards of 3.5 tenths faster than Lebay in this session. Now, we'll have to wonder whether or not that might be sandbagging from the 119, or if it is really the case here that Battiali may very well be on for his second career win in this championship. Nonetheless, it's set to make an exciting qualifying to follow, and that's even more so with the presence of David Tanguay, who's been squeezing in times well within that second margin for the majority of the testing coming in towards today. Nonetheless, it hasn't stopped the tide of a Chevy 1-2-3, and that's liable to be a Chevy 1-2-3-4, perhaps even a 1-2-3-4-5 by the end of this free practice session. 10 minutes left to go, as we see at the moment. There's always been something very bizarre about the design of the Circuit of the Americas. I don't inherently think it's a bad track. I think it gets kind of a bad rap for that point. But it certainly is one that feels, at least to someone who's very used to European racing tracks, it does feel a bit muddled. Is definitely the nicer way of saying things. Obviously, it pays a lot of homages to other Grand Prix circuits, and it's somewhat designed that way to be a chimera, an almost greatest hits track of some of the best corners in Grand Prix racing tracks. It's still one of the newest, if not the newest on the block here on ACC, introduced in 2010. In time for, I think it was actually designed to be open in time for the 2012 United States Grand Prix. So it was founded in 2010, and it took just about 2 years worth of construction before it would actually open its doors up to racing in 2012. You see here, Battiali down towards the line. 111, up to second fastest by 59 thousandths of a second. So laying in the precedent very early here for his chances to charge up towards the fastest time. 59 thousandths, really not a lot of time to think about at all. Less than the time it would take for you to actually react to a gap that small. 9.5 minutes left to go then. A Chevrolet 1, 2, 3, 4. Aston Martin playing second fiddle from 5th, 6th and 7th. Mercedes even further behind with 8th and 9th. Nearest to the line then we see here Christophe Dupois from 8th on the field. Needs to find 1.3 seconds over Chili Peppers in 7th place to get any chance there of overtaking the 24 in this session so far. We'll have to catch on with them later on. We see the number 30 next up towards the line at turn 20. Following on his trails, a whole wad of cars there, including the 35, the 120, and the 24, among several others. And to the line, Tanguay still third fastest on the field. We're about to see the arrival then of Vincent Simard in the 120. Down towards the line he goes. Fourth fastest, so a Chevy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, as if by fate, we find ourselves again in this situation where Chevrolet is hard clearing the field. 58 coming in towards the line. Now, this could be somewhat of a Hail Mary solution. This is what we've been waiting for here, and I wanted to keep it on under wraps until we got into the conversation a bit, but Timo de Tosto was looking incredibly fast, and I wanted to leave it up to surprise there here in this free practice session. We see that the time has now been thwarted by Christian Labbe, but it does lay in a very promising sign here. McLaren could very well upset the balance of Chevrolet-led dominance in this series. There was a third party at play this whole time, and it was the 58 of De Tosto. Now, what is it we do know at this time? This is the perfect playground for the McLaren. It's got high top-end speed, that which it will be able to utilize down the 3/4 of a mile worth of back straight between turns, looking at it here, turns 11 and 12, which we'll come up on in just a moment's time. If we go to catch on board with De Tosto, we see here from Richard Cecil making his way down towards turn 1 at Big Red. You can see there, highlighted at the bottom of the screens, Big Red was named after, just looking into it here, was named after Red McCombs, a Texas billionaire who was a large contributor towards the construction of the Circuit of the Americas, was one of the leading factors behind its creation and inception in the first place. Going to catch on board then with that 58, hoping to get a tour of the track then courtesy of McLaren's Timo de Tosto. Let's go to catch on board here. We see him down towards turn 12. Now, sadly, we don't have any straight line speed data to come out of the GT4s. That will certainly be something we look into the near future. We're on board at the moment with Timo de Tosto with McLaren, currently making his way through a very tight Sector 3. There's something to be noted there. I mean, there's very clear inspirations, especially at this section here, just having exited turns 15 and 16 to, I believe it's turn 9 and 10 down at the Bahrain International Circuit. So, clear homage to other circuits here. You've got this long sweeping right-hander. Now, while not, I don't think necessarily inspired by it, it does bring a lot of the same vibes as the long sort of double apex, almost squared off section that's taken flat out at the Qatar Grand Prix from the Lusail International Circuit. Making our way around turn 20. So on board with Timo de Tosto for our sort of unofficial tour then of the Circuit of the Americas. Starting things off then on the run up towards turn 1. It's probably one of the most iconic characteristics of the circuit. This run uphill into what seems like a very wide open hairpin left is anything but. This is an acute hairpin left that tightens in the middle. Very easy for lap 1 incidents to occur down at turn 1. Through to turn 2, long sweeping right-hander to bring us into this Maggots, Beckett and Chapel inspired section here in Sector 1, directly based off of the same S's section from Silverstone. Also, though, could be noted some inspirations from Suzuka with the S's section from turns 3, 4, 5 and 6. We're currently on the run up and around, by the looks of it here, in towards turns 7, 8 and 9. Round towards turn 10. So those corners really do just run at you thick and fast here. It is a case where it's a total onslaught of the senses through Sector 1 into a heavy braking zone here at turn 11. Much similar to turn 1's design, but on much flatter terrain, and that gives rise to a little bit of a miniature crest here. We go down into this dip, and then on the run back uphill on the run between turns 11 and 12. 3/4 of a mile of grade 1 between us and another heavy braking zone. You can see there where the rubbered-in line starts to appear. That's where the majority of the cars have been getting onto the brakes in towards turn 2. Very nicely done so far by De Tosto, bringing up his telemetry shows he's up by 0.2 of a second on his way now out round turn 13 and 14. This bizarre, almost dagger-shaped section of the track gives rise to the same area we discussed before, turns 15 and 16, inspired by that middle section from Bahrain. Out towards turns 17 and 18. And technically, this is not 2 apexes, but 4. Very bizarre. I mean, that's according to the track layout. You can see it is somewhat of a half octagon shape. So in towards turn 19, we see that that has kicked out some of the confidence away from De Tosto, but nonetheless, it was an exemplary tour of the track, courtesy of the 58. Still third in the session, so McLaren does have hope coming into today's session. Out through turn 20, down towards the line then, Timo De Tosto sadly couldn't find an improvement over that last time, but it was still very impressive indeed from the 58. 3.5 minutes left to go then in this session. Battiali leads by 112 thousandths over Lebay, De Tosto third, Tanguay fourth. All 4 of these, I should say, divided by a little over half a second. Further down the line then, Vincent Simard 5th, Clinton Bourne in 6th, Byron Forrest leading the charge for the Aston Martins in 7th. We see here Graham Green in 8th, Chili Peppers 9th, Richard Cecil in 10th, and Didier Potvin in 11th. Of the last times we have available then, Christophe Dupois 12th and Andrew Veldkamp in 13th. Still yet to see anything from Sean Cox or from Cal Ford, 2 of our newer drivers on the field. We also see a driver that was new for the sign-up of this championship, Dylan Vekere, currently out on track with Aston Martin, the 161, showing good promise in the run-up towards today's race. So it's going to be curious to see whether or not he can deliver upon that. Aston Martin has been struggling, so we've seen in the last couple of weeks, to keep pace with their rivals at Chevrolet. Really, I mean, if you're asking me as an Aston Martin fan, that wouldn't be the first time we've struggled at Cota. We still remember. Ivan Sanchez also in the session here with McLaren, ahead of Jorge Martinez. You have here Brandon Carr and Stephen Black, still yet to put times on the charts. We see, though, Martinez making their way out onto the track as we speak, in towards turn 1. Great support from Soviet Mario 911 in chat. Showing great support, of course. If I'm not mistaken, Soviet Mario is Alan Alexander from the Euro Titans Endurance team, so very clear that he would be showing any kind of support for the Porsche on the grid. Jorge Martinez. Now, we saw sprinklings of what he could do up in GT3 at the Real World Racing Day, 1 in the AM category there at Watkins Glen International, so back on American soil in the #1 Porsche, albeit this one downsized from the 911 992 to the 718 Cayman Club Sport. Nonetheless, could be quite an exciting drive to be expected out of Martinez today. Makes his way around turn 11. Nearest to the line, the 58, Timo De Tosto. Bear in mind, the gap between these 3 now down at 0.2 of a second. It is getting much, much closer now than previously estimated. Lebay doesn't look, I wouldn't say as confident in this sense here. It seems that these conditions at play, now bear in mind, it's pretty average, middle of the road sort of stuff, 26 degrees on track and 19 degrees ambient. It seems that Lebay, yes, he's still hitting towards the front row, but something just isn't clicking in the 119 the way that it's clicking in the 111. Now, come race time, of course, 2 races back-to-back, 2 30-minute races back-to-back. Is that going to be a case where that consistency is going to falter away from the 111 and go back into the hands of the 119? We've seen that Lebay is the kind of driver to set a fast time and stick to it, and he doesn't often break that habit unless he runs into traffic or runs into an incident. So it takes a lot to stop him in his tracks. So you see him down towards the line. And there, we definitely saw there was a lot more left in the back pocket towards the end of free practice for Lebay. 2:16.037, now 241 thousandths of a second ahead of Battiali. Leading it to the last second of free practice then. Coming up on the last 25 seconds as it stands right now, as we see Timo De Tosto won't have enough time to get out on track for one more flying lap. He's currently on his way through Sector 1. I believe this might just be more of a sighting section now for the McLaren. The 570S, of course, the baby brother of the 720S. Ironic given the fact that the 570S traces its lineage to the 650S and by proxy the MP4-12C. And that is significantly older than the 720S, but more in the figurative sense. It was replaced in GT4 racing by the Artura later down the line. But I will say 570S, and by proxy it's a more track-focused version, the 600 LT. Very fantastic little motors from the McLaren Auto Group. So at the end of that session, we find right now that McLaren is surrounded on all sides here. That is a worrying sight for the 58. 3 Chevrolets behind, 2 in front. If we're to believe the following into qualifying, this could be quite the brutal start for Timo de Tosto if he's to make 3rd position in qualifying later down the line. Well, we're not far from the discussions of qualifying coming up in a moment's time. To take a look into it just briefly here before we get on to quali. We'll be on for 20 minutes as with a recent regulation change bringing in a longer single qualifying for this round in particular. We don't know whether or not that rule will hold all the way over towards the next round in Snetterton. 7:47 down to the line. Graham Green from 8th on the field finishes the session in 7th for the 2:18 points. Well, sadly, we couldn't see what time that was because it vanished away a little too quickly, but oh well. Waiting then for these last 2 drivers to the line. Martinez and Vecare set to put in their first times of free practice. We're seeing here with Jorge Martinez making his way down through to turn 19. Now on the run in towards turn 20. The Porsche looking strong, but of course must consider under BOP today it is really not going to be seeing much of a benefit. But down towards the line, let's see where Martinez places himself. An 8th place, so really not too shabby at all. Tucks in just between Chevrolet and Aston Martin. We'll have to wait to see the 161 down to the line, and it looked to have been an invalidation there, sadly, for Vecare. 20 minutes of qualifying underway. We can see immediate movement up front there from multiple of the Malwar Racing cars. It's a swarm of them on the exit. First non-MRT car to make their way out from behind them, the 747 of Graham Green. Taking a look on board, though, with the one stage in the charge here. Leading it. Who else could it have been then? The 119 of Christian LeVay. Looking into the qualifying predictions as we stay on board then with the 119 in towards turn 1, trailing him Kevin Quain, David Tangway, and actually we can see they're tucked in the middle, snuck his way through was Richard Cecil. So taking a look at those qualifying predictions, Christian LeVay predicted at pole Timo de Tosto, not too far off there, just shy of a second. When you consider that's in a McLaren going up against a Chevrolet in its prime, that is quite impressive indeed. Dylan Vecare predicted at 3rd for Aston Martin ahead of Giovanni Badiali in 4th place. David Tangway 5th, with Vincent Simard in 6th. George Todd now having recently moved over to Malwar Racing, and we called that in advance. We saw the change in the colours before the official announcement that he had joined Malwar Racing. We saw it in Valencia, we called that, and as it turns out now, as the penny drops, Todd has now joined the likes of the Malwar Racing team officially. We see also new driver on the field, Cal Ford from Australia, predicted in 8th place, 2:18.252. Really not too far off a shout there of being in 7th, 4th row at the moment for Ford at this time. Chili Peppers predicted 9th and Clinton Bourne predicted in 10th. See there, TMX Phantoms and Chat to Tosto not too far off. He's a second off. You've got to think relative terms here. I don't think a lot of drivers are expecting coming into this session, given how strong it's been over the course of the season, for anyone besides LeVay to be up on that front row. That's a given. I think we're dealing here with a more like 2020 situation in Formula 1 where we kind of know Hamilton was going to be on pole, but who's going to be behind him? Yes, I was made aware of that, Soviet. We're not going to comment on it at this time. Driver transfer news happens a lot. I think what's more relevant on this field has been that recent transfer for George Todd over to MRT. We'll discuss that as and when he reappears on the grid in any of the series we're covering at the moment. But until that point, it's just not on the radar. Well, it is, but not publicly. Down towards the line then, LeVay to start the first of the flying laps. Will stay on board then with the 119 for our tour of the track here in the first flying lap of the session. I suppose what better car then to take us on a tour here in Austin, Texas than 6.2 litres of screaming American V8. You see this section just really difficult to navigate here, and it's quite surprising how elegantly the 119 is able to make his way through that in sector 1 in such a big car like the Camaro. But of course we must consider it has got quite the significant amount of weight taken off of it under balance of performance today, so that's for once played to its benefit. is to have that kind of size, that kind of gravity about it. On a track where there are quite a few curbs, he can afford to cut quite a few of them. Now, he'll be playing things a little bit sparingly over the course of qualifying. That could be to his detriment later down the line. But with a track so easy to get invalidated on, this could sort of caution a more hesitant performance from the majority of this field. We'll see. It's a case of who dares wins. On his way down towards turn 12, LeBay still leading that charge. The next times rolling in after his will be the 6:07, the 30, and the 8:24. That'll be Kevin Quain, David Tanguay, and actually we see there the number 5 getting past the 8:24. So I believe Byron Forrest was on an outlap as Richard Cecil now passes on the back straight. Those first times coming in will be 2 Chevrolets, a Mercedes, and an Aston Martin. I think it's definitely going to get to the point somewhere down the line with how much Chevrolet has dominated on this field. I wouldn't be entirely against the idea of just a Chevrolet Cup Series. I think it would look rather funny and certainly would sound quite nice as well. In towards turn 20 then, the benchmark time coming in from Christian LeBay, so high standards right from the boot here. Across the line he goes on what appeared to have been invalidated, so a curious start indeed. It'll be Kevin Quain next in the suggestion, and it's a 2:17.232. Then that's immediately usurped by 0.08 of a second by David Tanguay. Richard Cecil to the line for third place with Aston Martin. From behind him we see there coming to the line is Vincent Simard, up to the fastest time by 337 thousandths to a 2:16.815 in the number 120. From behind him, Clinton Bourne sadly was on an invalid lap. That was the same story, so it appeared, for a few drivers. But one driver it wasn't for was Sean Cox in the top 5 there with BMW. But you can see by 4.162 seconds, I think it has been a case that was a bit of a fluke lap for him. And it was a case of just surviving a run around Cota to put a time onto the charts. We see there almost immediately Giovanni Badiali up by nearly a full second. Dylan Vecchiere to second with Aston Martin, up and ahead of Vincent Simard by 3 thousandths of a second. The 161 entered into this championship relatively unknown, but the grid ought to know his name by now. Vecchiere up to second, and this is showing a very promising sign here that it may not be a single horse race in the case of Chevrolet-led dominance. Aston Martin, and for that matter as well, McLaren, have shown great promise in the hands of Vecchiere and Timo de Tosto. We'll be seeing the 58 hopefully to the line not too long from now, currently pinpointing his current position on the field. Shows, well, let's go and find him here. He's on his way down towards turn 10 and 11 in the 58 McLaren, so we'll wait a little later on to see him down towards the line. Nearest to the line at this time is the 119 of Christian LeBay. Now, it's going to be a case here. Where does he find himself slotting into? Our predictions have it placed here right now up at around second place, up and ahead of Vecchiere, pushing the Aston down to third. You can see the amount of time available there. 2 minutes 15.906. And then dead on 906 thousandths away is Vecchiere. So this is the challenge that came with it. Now, when you consider as well that this was previously slated to be 2 10-minute qualifying sessions, LeBay would be quite nervous right about now as he'd only have about 3 minutes left to go. But 13 is the tally he has at this time. So on his way down around turn 20, let's hope this is a valid lap for him before the session. Halfway down to the line goes the 119, and as predicted there, second fastest behind Badiali by 216 thousandths. Now, I was predicting the margins were going to be a little bit closer in and around the 10th range, but 216 thousandths does bring us into a interesting little conversation when it comes to the fact that Badiali, as it stands, is the only driver in this qualifying session thus far to have broken into the 215s. Number 6 across the line a moment ago, and that was Clinton Bourne to 7th on the field. From behind him, the 74 of Sean Cox maintains a top 10 position. The 58 coming to the line, so about to catch him here just out of turn 20. Timo de Tosto, where does he find himself? In the top 5 for McLaren. And from behind him, the number 111, I believe that was there, and a new fastest time. And that is 2 minutes 15.891 for Giovanni Badiali. Hunting down his second career win in this series. Of course, his last win came out of the Hungaroring 2 rounds ago. It's curious to see then, after his hiatus at round 5, is the Italian on for a track of another race win. Right now, he's definitely laid in some solid foundations. Fastest time of the session by 231 thousandths to the nearest car. Nearest to the line then, we have a dual set of cars here. The 747 of Graham Green, but watching here from the back with Chili Peppers from 14th to 10th, as we saw Green up to momentarily in 10th place, now pushed down to 11th by the Aston Martin. We're seeing a lot more area denial be played out by Aston Martin here. Normally, they find themselves conjoined to one another at the end of most qualifying sessions, especially in the last couple of weeks here. We've seen a whole block of Aston Martins in and around that top 10. You can see, though, it's been a bit of a multi-manufacturer effort to keep Chevrolet out of any more powerful positions. We see Aston Martin up on the podium courtesy of Dylan Vekere. We see McLaren in the top 5 courtesy of Timo Tosto. Mercedes in the top 10 courtesy of Kevin Quain. More Aston Martins guarding that 5th row. And the reason we describe all of it this way is because it really has been a game of chess between Aston Martin and Chevrolet for the longest time this season. To see more manufacturers getting involved in this round, such as McLaren with Tosto and such as Mercedes with Quain, does present itself as a very unique turning point in this series. Down towards the line we see here with Kevin Quain. From behind him, the number 30 of David Tanguay. Quain across the line from 7th on the field, stays there as he crosses the line. Tanguay up from 6th place. Does he go any further than that? Not this time around, but you can see he's drawing the gap in closer and closer to Timo Tosto. Across the line a moment ago when Richard Cecil, 9th in the session thus far, still on for that 5th row. Clinton Bourne from 8th place on the field comes down towards the line here and sadly couldn't find an advance up to 7th place. Bear in mind, 10 minutes left to go in this session, so just coming up on the halfway mark. Still a few cars left to have put times on the chart. Sanchez, Martinez and Carr, as we see though here with Jorge Martinez down to the line. The Porsche about to potentially put a time on the chart, sadly invalidated on that last lap. Fortunately, just under 10 minutes left to go, so plenty of time indeed, somewhere in the ballpark of about 5 laps available for the number 1 at this time. Perhaps just a little bit less there by a scrape. So next on board, the 91, Ivan Sanchez. Driver we've seen plenty of over on the NLRL Sunday League. And his number 91 570S, he makes 10th place, so impressive stuff. McLaren seem to have found their groove in this track here at the Circuit of the Americas. This is really where they get to open the taps. They've still got, I believe, the stock gearing from the road-going 570S. Now, when you consider that car was making north of 600 horsepower at its best, you've got to consider that the down tune to bring this car into competitive lining in SRO's GT4 regulations left it quite nerfed in terms of overall power. So it wouldn't be entirely out of the realm of possibility to suggest that their top end comes from the fact that the original gear ratios were left in on what is just effectively a detuned version of its road-going engine. Number 35 across the line a moment ago, Didier Potvin starts another flying lap with Aston Martin. Currently 17th in the session. The only driver left to have put a time on the charts is Martinez in the number 1 Porsche 718. It seems to have been majoritively a case here of just trying to keep the car within the track limits, let alone putting a time on the charts. And that is one of the greatest difficulties all drivers encounter, regardless of skill level, coming into the Circuit of the Americas. For whatever reason, this has the most sensitive track limits on Assetto Corsa Competizione. It gets to a point where it borders on unfair at times. Driving lines that is normally used throughout the race simply are not feasible under these kinds of scrutinous limits. Nearest to the line, the 119 and the 6. We go to catch on board out through turn 19, following on their trails. Mind you, the 824 and the number 1. So we'll be catching on board with these 4. So the 119 down towards the line, the number 6 on his trails there. So Labey across the line doesn't improve up to first place. We see here for Bourne across the line, nothing there either. The 824 Forest from 13th up to 9th. And then for the number 1, Martinez across the line just a moment from now. And we see there 8th place for the number 1. And behind them, the number 74. Sean Cox maintains 15th place at the moment on his second race in the championship. Made his debut over the course of Valencia. Finished 13th in that race. Right now 15th in qualifying for this one. 7.5 minutes left to go. Nearest to the line, the 91, which has just come into the pit lane, but the 24 that is still out on track here. Chili Peppers, currently 13th, was momentarily part of that top 10. He makes his way up to 12th there, pushes Ivan Sanchez down to 13th with McLaren. So we're starting to see here Aston Martin form up just around the back of that top 10. Number 5 coming to the line here, Richard Cecil, onto another flying lap by the looks of it here. Needs exactly a 10th of a second to push Byron Forrest out of the top 10. And to get himself up onto that 5th row. The 35 we saw earlier on, Didier Potvin. Across the line he goes from 18th on the field, stays there with about 5 seconds and 59 thousandths from the fastest time in the session thus far. In terms of what's going on locally at the front, it is still Badiali from Lebay, from Vekere, and then Simard and Ditosto towards the back of that top 5. Now, a curious point to make here is going to be that positioning for the Aston Martin. We've seen 3rd place is an underrated position. Now, of course, everyone wants to be on the front row, but it's not the end of the world if you can't make it. Where you want to be is 3rd. And for the reason that has been employed over the last season by Badiali, for that matter, was a great showcase of exactly why. If you can get yourself in 3rd, you can get a good race start. You are following in the direct line of the race leader. Now, this is highly situational. You need both of the front-running cars to get a good start, which is very likely today, considering that front row with 5.5 minutes left to go is comprised of Badiali and Lebay, 2 drivers very close to each other in terms of starting pace. You need them to go side by side, and you need that car in 2nd to fold, because they'll be forced to drop back in onto the racing line, but you'll already be there, parked on the rear bumper of the leading car. So for Vekere, he does find himself in this sort of gambit position here, where he can play quite a unique hand for that race start. Now, bear in mind, he also needs to get a good start, so a lot of stars have to align to put you in this good position, but he's already got the first base of that covered by being in 3rd. Now, if he can improve to the front row, that's a bonus, but all is not yet lost if he starts this race from 3rd. Bear in mind, that gap is growing very, very thin here. 3 thousandths sit between himself and Vincent Simard. And the plan gets compromised if he is to find himself starting from 4th. So Vincent Simard is feverishly hunting down his chances to start on the podium here in the number 120. They make a Chevy 1-2-3 start here at their home race in America. Down towards the line, we do see both Vekere and Simard, for that matter, making their way down towards the line here. 4.5 minutes left to go. Simard across the line. By looks of it, there wasn't enough to find 3 thousandths, or at least was either that or invalidated for the 120. Vekere doesn't find any position to advance either. They're still stuck in that infinitesimal 3,000th of a second gap. I mean, if you were to put that in relative terms on the track, that would be, well, quite literally millimeters of difference in the distance of the car there. Badiali, we did see just a moment ago, was an improvement on his overall fastest, and currently the session fastest at 2:15.858, still presides as the only driver on this grid to have broken into the 2:15 so far in qualifying. Lebay still hanging around there, 264 thousandths of a second away from Badiali. Ditosto up to 3rd, pushes Vekere down to 4th. Moreover, compromises Simard, because now he's found himself at the back of the top 5. It's an all-British second row for the manufacturers. McLaren and Aston Martin taking the fight to Chevrolet. Bear in mind, Chevrolet encompasses the 1st and 3rd row here. This is quite a dangerous spot to find themselves in. Meanwhile, Lebay slices the gap down to only 54 thousandths of a second. When you consider right now there's enough juice in the tank to give the car about 2 more laps to play with before the end of qualifying. Lebay needs to spend these next 2 laps hunting down a chance of even a 55 thousandth of a second improvement. The gap so thin, but as we've seen in sessions before, it is incredibly hard to make up even the smallest amounts of time with a grid this airtight. David Tanguay makes 3rd place, forcing the British manufacturers down to 4th and 5th. Ditosto's McLaren and Vekere's Aston Martin now at the back of the top 5, 4th and 5th respectively. In terms of local times, he's less than a 10th away from Ditosto, so there is absolutely still the chance here for fight back by the 58 McLaren. Moreover, I wouldn't count out the 161 Aston Martin just yet. But his fights are more focused here, now on the 3rd row of keeping himself up and ahead of Vincent Simard. That gap still resides at 3 thousandths of a second. We'll see here from Simard down towards the line out of turn 20, whether or not he can make the leap up. Across the line he goes, and by looks of it, couldn't find it that time around. For Vekere, he crosses the line, and it's the same story. These two playing in stalemate for the majority of the session thus far. And behind them, we saw Richard Cecil still in 12th place. As you can see, an exact 10th away from Byron Forrest, but both of them pushed out of the top 10 at this time by Chili Peppers, their fellow Aston Martin, in 10th place. 1.5 minutes left to go, so for drivers retiring into the pit lane, such as the case there for Vekere, they're beyond the point of no return. They're not going to be able to get one more lap in now, so Vecre settling for 5th, hoping that that's been enough to keep Simard at bay. We see Timo de Tosto down towards the line to start his final flying lap as he crosses the line from 4th. On the field, he's back up to 3rd place and onto the front of that 2nd row, eyeing up his chances now in the same power play position we mentioned from earlier on. Now the McLaren finds himself trailing the leading car. That looks to be at this time Badiali, but again, with that gap being so fine between the pair, could that be the case? We see LeBay pulling it to the left-hand side of the track, and by looks of it there, with a minute left to go, LeBay brings it to the pit lane. Badiali, as far as it's concerned at the moment, is completely locked out of being taken away from pole position. Looks like, for the sum of his efforts there, the Italian has done it. We'll wait to see, though. With a minute left to go, Di Tosto brings it to the pit lane. Tanguay to the line. Can he go back to 3rd place? He's got one more lap to do so we'll catch on with him a little later on. Nearest to the line then at this time, the 111. Badiali's done more than enough in this time to secure another pole position away, and he's already got himself a very good staging point here for his potential 2nd career win this season. Down towards the line then he goes, with 10 seconds against the clock. As he hits the line there, he looks to be on to potentially another flying lap, so we'll catch up with him a little later on. The 747 down towards the line, just beaten by the bell there. Graham Green from 14th on the field, finishes the session 14th. The number 6 from behind him, Clinton Bourne from 8th on the field. And at the end of this qualifying session here, finishes in 8th. From behind him, by looks of it there, the 120, Vincent Simard gets up and ahead of Dylan Vecre. Those two separate by 0.03 of a second. The 39 nearest to the line, so we go to catch on board here with Mercedes' Christophe Dupois, 19th in the session thus far, making his way down towards turn 19 and turn 20. You see pulling it to one side, the 39 calls it quits on qualifying there. The 707 still out on track at this time, Stephen Black, but on a valid flying lap, so it appears, is that of David Tanguay, still hunting down his chances to start from the podium here to make it a Chevrolet 1-2-3. Currently, McLaren splits the tide like Moses parting the Red Sea, so it seems there. That 570S split exactly down the middle, a pack of 4 Chevrolets. 111 still out on track here, so Badiali is hunting down an improvement. He's already done enough, but it's about the satisfaction of breaking even further in over his personal best here. 2:15.858, the fastest time of anyone in this session thus far. LeBay makes it the only other driver to have broken into that 2:15 bracket. The rest of the field hanging around in the 2:19 and above area. 2:16, I should say. 2:19. Oh, Lord, that's be quite far down. Tanguay to the line then. The end of the session, stays 4th. Well then, a very exciting extended qualifying session then, a unique feature of this round in particular. We'll see whether or not that rule gets carried forth into the rest of the season's double sprints. The only one left, of course, being the next round coming up, the penultimate round of the championship, if I'm not mistaken, being Snetterton on February 17th. That'll be February 18th at 1 AM Greenwich Mean Time for those viewing from the UK. And then, of course, the season finale returns to the 60-minute format at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway the week thereafter. Well then, at the end of qualifying, only one article of news, and we mentioned it in passing earlier on in the broadcast we had for TRC's Sprint Cup round, and that was a fantastic broadcast. Do recommend going back and watching that fantastic racing in Le Castellet. But taking a look into the news, of course, the elephant in the room this week amidst the Super Bowl was its reveal by Cadillac during that time of their 2026 F1 car. Now, I'm a bit split on this one. Personally, something feels a little bit missing. It is certainly a very distinct car. I'm getting clear vibes to older Formula One. I think I've seen a lot of comparisons drawn to the late 1990s McLaren that was driven by such drivers as David Coulthard and Mika Hakkinen, later on also by Kimi Räikkönen. It is an interesting looking car, but I feel like a lot of the fan renders painted a much more vivid picture than the one we already ended up getting with Cadillac. It seems that, and an opinion I held was it was sort of a case where its distinctive part of the field was having very few distinctive aspects, where the grid is quite a colourful ensemble. Was it really the calling card here to go with no colours whatsoever on the Cadillac, especially knowing when you compare it up against what they've ran in the World Endurance Championship and by proxy the IMSA Sports Car Championship, that they could have done a lot more with the colours there. Maybe that's my personal standpoint. I'd be curious to know what you're thinking at home. But until that point, let's get on to the grid for today. One of two races set to follow, of course. Just quickly taking a look into the session regulations before we get on to race one's formation lap. 30 minutes of racing apiece with no mandatory pit stop. They'll be changed back to back, and gauging off of the data we had from as far back as season 4 as the NLRL Sunday League, both of those races will go off of today's current grid from qualifying. They won't go off of the results from the last race. Of course, we'll wait to see for a proper update of that until we know it for certain. Until we get to that point, though, we're about 2.5 minutes before the formation lap. It's Giovanni Badiali on pole position. Christian Lebay separated by less than a tenth of a second at the end of the session there. He makes second place. Timo de Tosto with McLaren starts from third, and alongside David Tanguay on the second row. Third row, Vincent Simard gets up and ahead of Dylan Vekere in the last possible moments of qualifying there, up to fifth place for the 120 with the 161 in sixth. The fourth row, Kevin Quain and Clinton Bourne. Fifth row, Jorge Martinez and Chili Peppers. Byron Forrest and Richard Cecil make the sixth row. In 11th and 12th, Ivan Sanchez and Graham Green, 13th and 14th. On that seventh row of the grid. Eighth row, then, two of the newer drivers in this series, Sean Cox and Cal Ford in 15th and 16th. Brandon Carr in 17th, ahead of Didier Potvin in 18th. Christophe Dupois 19th, and Andrew Veldkamp in 20th. Rounding out the field then in 21st, Stephen Black in the 707 Mercedes. One and a half minutes left to go then as we take a look upon this field. Giovanni Badiali starting from the inside down towards turn one. Trailing him will be De Tosto and Simard on the odd running of orders there. And then along his right-hand side, starting from the front row as well, Christian Lebay, and then trailing from his point of view on the even running of cars will be that of Tanguay and Vekere. All in all, though, looking at it here, 11 cars one side, 10 on the other for the start of the formation lap in about 20 seconds time. So definitely a lot to be expected coming up into both of these races here. With two races comes double the scoring opportunity. So this can make a huge break into the championship here to deny Lebay points. This could be definitely pay dirt here for Badiali to make his way back up from what is a drop from third in the round before to now seventh in today's round. So he's got a great opportunity to make up for that lost time in the last round at round 5 of the championship. On board then with Badiali. And we'll leave you on board with Badiali to start the formation lap here in the number 111. We'll be back with you in just a moment's time. So then, on board with Giovanni Badiali at the forefront of the field, taking a look around then over the course of the first formation lap of 2 today here for race 1. At round 6 of the championship in season 2 of the Competizione Performance League Pro-Am Cup America Series. We can see around the order starting down in 7th place, just behind that of Dylan Vekere is going to be Kevin Quain. So it appears, making up positions in that top 10 as well. Could be a promising start expected there. We just saw from the golden Porsche crossing the foreground of the screen, that being the number 1 of Martinez. He starts up and alongside Chili Peppers at the back of the top 10 on that 5th row. Bear in mind, it's definitely worth the suggestion here that that third, 4th, 5th and 6th row could absolutely see some sizable position changes if calamity is to erupt over the first 2 rows on their run up into turn 1. Very difficult to make moves up the inside here, unless you're following directly on from your opponents. And we've seen it doesn't really matter what series it needs to be, whether it's prototype racing, whether it's bike racing, whether it's Formula 1. Getting up the inside at turn 1 is not an easy feat here at the Circuit of the Americas. It won't be much easier then for what are effectively the little brothers of GT3. They weren't even designed to be here in the first place. We see then everyone warming their tyres up. Giovanni Badiali doing his best impression of Kimi Räikkönen, so it appears. Down towards turn 12. Suppose it is the case here, and you do see it if you catch on board with Badiali on some of the straightaway sections, that what he ends up doing, we've seen this before, he holds both pedals down because what he does is build up core heat there in the brakes, and what that does, it bleeds out in towards the rest of the wheel, so it radiates out into the tires, ends up warming them almost essentially from the inside out, sort of how you would get insulative heating in your house. It's in the same way he's utilizing the brakes, allowing them to get incredibly hot during the formation lap, knowing they'll cool down in time, but their radiated heat will bleed out and sap into the tires, allowing him to build up, slowly but surely, more core temperature, which is a vital aspect of keeping the tyres in good nick over the course of the race. It ultimately will affect his performance much greater than carcass temperature ever could. So then, beginning that formation process, so it does appear, heading in towards turn 19. We'll begin that in a moment's time. Wait for the 119 to line up alongside, as we see there. Now lining up 2 abreast on the run in towards turn 20. Presently then, as it stands, 21 cars and a pretty short run of things out through turn 20. I believe it will be down at the start line, not the finish line here. They do sit on opposite ends of the grid, but down towards the line then, 10 cars on one side, 11 on the other. Heading down towards the line for the first of 2 races here in round 6, season 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Rolling down towards the line then, all Chevrolet front row, all action then into the second half of the season. Race 1 of 2 today, without further ado, is officially underway. We're green and racing here in the Circuit of the Americas, and a great start already from the front row, but not one that was prophesized for by Timo de Tosto, as we see getting up the inside onto the racing line of the leading car is the number 30 of Tanguay, and ultimately Lebay runs out wide. That does invite in an opportunity here by David Tanguay. You can see there Lebay slots back in over the nose of the number 30. Meanwhile, out back of things, relatively clean start. Was not expecting that one down through turn 1, but we can see Dylan Beckeray is going head-to-head, so it seems, there with Timo de Tosto. Let's get a look on board with these two. Getting on with the 58. He's got his hands full from the race start then. Beckeray with an enthusiastic start, already fighting with de Tosto for 4th place on the field, on board with the McLaren. Meanwhile, up in front, Tanguay, Lebay and Badiali begin to cut away from the rest of the field here. The Chevys already beginning that charge, looking to try and join them here amongst a pack of non-Chevrolets is the 120 of Vincent Simard. Timo de Tosto, though, one of the ace in the holes that he has with the number 58 McLaren is like Chevrolet. He's got some formidable top-end speed to play with, and you'll see that demonstrated right about now here. The Aston Martin of Beckeray getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, still a decent machine there, as we do see, hang on, the yellow flags are out. It's for the 824, the 747 and the 616. So Graham Green, Byron Forrest and Andrew Veldkamp, for that matter, all caught up in an incident down at turn 11. Meanwhile, from the rear view here of the number 58, we just saw a move up to 5th place for Vincent Simard, still fending off his position of 4th on the field thus far. We're back in the green flag conditions in Sector 3 as we stay on board with the 58. Meanwhile, it's only about 0.4 of a second between Tanguay and Lebay. That stands upon the chances to get even smaller, with the 30 leaching in to the slipstream generated by the 119 for the 58. His current objective is to hold on to 4th by any means necessary to gain some serious points in the championship. Of course, 10th at the moment in the current standings, with 2 opportunities to make up serious ground, much as we've seen the case to be as well for Badiali, starting this round of the championship down to 7th after a hiatus in the round before. Both of these drivers stand to gain serious leverage on the run in towards round 7. So as it stands then, Badiali from Lebay, Tangre, De Tosto, Simard, Vekere, Quain and Martinez in the top 8. That's a very close one at the moment between Quain and Vekere. This could be a curious one to watch here going on board with some of the Aston Martins on the field. We'll try to catch on board here with Dylan Vekere. He's going toe-to-toe on that third row, so it seems, just into the fourth row as well with Kevin Quain. It's also worth noting the potential fight coming up here for Richard Cecil, Chili Peppers and Jorge Martinez. 2 Astons versus a Porsche towards the back of the top 10. Byron Forrest sadly appears to be a DNF from this race. Whatever happened down at turn 11 has took not 1 but 3 cars way out of commission, with the 747 and the 616 now desperately clinging to the back of the field, but by a growing margin there. The Chevrolet and the Mercedes may very well be stranded in race 1 of 2. Bear in mind, a lot of these mistakes can later be ratified in race 2, so it's not entirely over if an incident does occur on race 1. That's not to say that it should. You see then, from the point of view here, trying to catch on board with some of the other battles on track, we see just briefly in here with David Tangre. Now, this is nearly sitting in perfect stalemate with the McLaren behind him and the Chevy in front of him, getting closer and closer to that balancing point of 7/10 either side of it, down through to turn 12. Meanwhile, just to point this out as well, Simard gaining ground on De Tosto. Very likely for there to be a fight inside the top 5 not too far from now. We see here for, this is Cal Ford in the number 484, up and by the looks of it, trying to get up the inside of the 707 of Stephen Black. Stephen Black goes around the outside though at turn 12. He's up the inside at turn 13. We see here with the 484. As the Mercedes slots back in front of him, he's looking for a switch back. Can he find the leverage for it? Absolutely. Out through turn 14 he goes. Cal Ford up into 18th. 17th, I should say. A little slow to update there. So you see, it does seem to show Lebay in the lead, and it shows Badiali and Tangre in a joint third, so very bizarre. But there's the data updates. Badiali in the lead still, Lebay second, but getting closer and closer now. You can make the argument in the same way we saw between Tangre, Lebay and De Tosto. We're seeing here between Lebay, Tangre and Badiali. A stalemate starting to build. We can see the gap in the top 5 getting closer between the 120 and the 58, so there is that likelihood for the fight of 4th place. We see here from Vincent Simard's point of view. Looking up through to turn 1. We'll follow here with the 120 just down through sector 1 to see how that gap progresses. We're on board at the moment with Vincent Simard in the 120, currently in this pursuit of 4th place. Meanwhile, up the order, you can see clear line of sight from the point of view of the 120, that view of the podium, all of which commanded by Chevrolet machinery. You see here, sector 1 seems to be where the McLaren is struggling. It's either understeering or oversteering. It's finding this very drastic, sort of almost binary setting. It's either oversteering or understeering. There's very little Goldilocks zone to be found on the 58. The Chevys, though, in spite of what they're getting on a design standpoint here, and despite what physics would otherwise have you believe, are just having much better of a time, so it appears. That stability gained from the front engine platform is absolutely vital when the car is thrown in so many separate directions over the course of a single sector. That seems to be the Achilles heel for McLaren. They can out-corner the Chevrolet on paper, and there's everything to say that they can do it, but when you're throwing the car back and forth, you're creating this awful pendulum effect in the mid-engine and rear-engine cars, and that's often their Achilles. That's where you tend to see issues through Maggots, Beckett's, Chapel, or moreover in this track here, down through turns 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And over at Suzuka, you'd see it on the run through the S section through turns 3, 4, 5, and 6. Areas where the car has to rapidly change direction over and over and over again creates this added momentum over the rear axle that ends up swaying the car out. You don't get that problem with the Chevrolets. The worst you'll ever have it is the weight of the engine over the nose will drag you out of the corner. You'd never lose stability any other way. You see here a very close fight going on. Cal Ford versus Graham Green. Behind them, Stephen Black and Christophe Dupois. 2 Mercedes cars, 2 Chevrolets down through turns 15 and 16. You see there, looking up the inside was Green on Ford for that time. Couldn't find any ground of it. So watching on with these guys here, just out the back of the top 15. This is getting very close indeed between this ensemble. Down towards turn 19 and 20, we see here with Graham Green. You see there, Stephen Black very late onto the brakes into turn 20. He's gained some ground there over the 747. On his way out of turn 20, bear in mind, same story for the 747 on the 484. down towards turn 1. Could Green be looking up the inside here on Cal Ford? He is going for it. He's leapt up the inside at Big Red. He's had to really back off there onto the brakes. Nearly rejoins them, pushing the 707 off the track there. That does invite in the opportunity for Christophe Dupois to come and have a go here on the 707. Just behind them, you can see is Andrew Veldkamp. We see for the two Mercedes cars down through the opening sector. This is just at the very back of the field at this time. We'll be catching on board with some of the further fights up the order. We do have one on mind here, and that's Clinton Bourne versus Sean Cox. We caught them just in the nick of time here. Up the inside through turn 10, now to turn 11. Bourne looking up the inside on Cox. This is for 11th on the field. Through goes the number 6. Can the 74 stand to switch it back? He'll be in the slipstream, so he does have the run of things down towards turn 12. The question therein remains, is there the possibility for the 74 to execute? 3/4 of a mile here. You can see the BMW had more than enough momentum to carry. Has moved his way back up over onto the racing line, up and ahead of Bourne's number 6. An official statement from Byron Forrest. And this is what he wrote so far. This is Byron Forrest. I quit. That was the official statement. He's been hit every race to no fault of his own. These are the statements we're reading from the 824 at this time. And appears to be the end of the line then for Byron Forrest. He's reached his breaking point there, and it really has been a case. You've observed it over the course of this championship. The most rotten of luck possible for the 824 Aston Martin. Was taken out, supposedly, according to the statements we were receiving by the 747. Now, I don't deny that either. There was 3 cars involved, 2 of which was the 824 and the 747, so every likelihood that could have been the case. Post-race investigation will likely have no impact now, as the 824 has withdrawn from the championship. We see at the inside, goes Bourne over Cox. This is still for 11th place, mind you, and all of their pushing and shoving is inviting in a certain Ivan Sanchez, and the number 91. In the meantime, as we break into the first 10 minutes of the session thus far, we see back up the inside goes Bourne. You got to appreciate this commitment to a proper elbows out style of racing here from the number 6 Chevrolet. We see the 74 still trying his luck. These two seem quite well matched as it stands right now in terms of driver-to-driver matchups. I think for such a new driver on the grid, Sean Cox has found his fair game here in the court of Clinton Bourne. These two fit together like pieces of a puzzle. 2 of almost the exact same style of driver, just 2 different machines. And what that makes is for a proper riot show to watch. Meanwhile, just quickly looking up the order, we do see gaining significant distance now on Tanguay appears to be the 58. Eclipsed there on the long exposure shot down the back straight here. We do see the 58 up the inside. Timo de Tosto gunning for 3rd place on his run down towards turn 12, I should say. In the number 58, trying to go the long way around the number 30. Contact between the pair. As they rejoin into turns 13 and 14, you can see up the road there, Labay getting much, much closer into Sector 3 on Giovanni Badiali. Down through to turn 15 and 16, the 58 still up the inside on the 30, heading down towards turn 17 and 18. Meanwhile, hanging out behind them, you can see, is an impatient Vincent Simard. Still waiting for his opportunity and having to run all the way around the outside there. Timo de Tosto loses out ground. Now having to take up the helm of a fight of 4th, up with that of Vincent Simard. The 120 up and around the outside at turn 19. A very engaged fight here inside of that top 5 between the 2 Chevys and the McLaren. Now, not to take away from the action they've reveled in so far, but as we quickly catch on board here with that leading pair, Badiali versus Labay on their way down towards turn 1, 18.5 minutes left to go in this session. It has now formed up to be the basis of a Chevrolet 1, 2, 3, 4, but up at the forefront of it is the battle for the race lead. Down through to Sector 1, as we see here with the remainder of the top 5. We are noticing something there. Vecchiere closing ground with Aston Martin, and I think that's thanks in part to the fighting these 3 have shared in over the course of the last lap and a half in full contact. So it's definitely been the case that Aston Martin slowly being reeled back in to this fight amongst the top 5. Now, we don't necessarily stand upon the chances by looks of it here of another Chevrolet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this race, but that's not to say that that cannot be replicated in the next. So far then, McLaren and Aston Martin spearheading that charge up towards Chevrolet. Further down the line, we see that ongoing fight continues then between Cox and Bourne. Cox now up in 11th once again. Bourne attacking, and that is again invited in Ivan Sanchez to come and have a go. Very much so now an active part of this fight, no less of an observer. Seeing here down the back straight, just catching back on board with that fight of 4th place. This is the attacking spot for McLaren because they're the one manufacturer that can routinely go toe-to-toe with Chevrolet for straight line speed, but stopping power is a different question there. 570S just eked out for position by the Chevy Camaro, number 120 of Simard. Looking on board with these three once again, this is proving to be quite a unique fight here just outside of the top 10 down through turn 12. Clinton Bourne looked up the inside but couldn't find any dice of it, and even if he did find the move up the inside, he'd be to the outside at turn 13. So it's an area where you've really got to do a bit of a double take when it comes to, do you want to commit to the inside all the way, because it could very much so flip back on you in a moment's notice. Down through turns 15 and 16, down toward turn 17 and 18. Now, just to point this out briefly here, that previous interval showed a 1/10 of a second separate there between Simard and Di Tosto. Meanwhile, up front, things still in routine business there. Labay separate by 6/10 to Badiali at the lead of this race, nearly at the halfway mark of race 1 of 2. Watching here with Kevin Quain, stranded between moments of action here. Martinez trying to close ground on him. Meanwhile, out back, we see Richard Cecil and Chili Peppers clash heads for 9th position. The two Astons head-to-head down through turn 1. Peppers maintains a top 10 position at this time. Meanwhile, we see here more side-by-side action between the fight of Sean Cox and Clinton Bourne. Bourne runs all the way to the outside, so Cox retakes 11th place as it stands. This has been one of the most heavily guarded 11th place fights I think we've ever seen. It's currently held up between these three. I think we're about to see here perhaps the first of a major attack by Ivan Sanchez. He got close to it there on the run down through turn 2, but it's in this section here, as we've noticed also with Di Tosto, is where McLaren starts to struggle a tad. Meanwhile, taking a look in here, Cecil v Peppers still going on at this time in the same vein that we're seeing here between Di Tosto and Simard, though much more in the active sense, as now the 58 up and alongside now looks to be ahead of the 120 as we get down onto the brakes in towards turn 12. He's got hold of the racing line there. The 120 now tucks in behind him through to sector 3 we go. Now his major attacking spots are going to be coming up back into sector 1, but he could very well have a chance of it trying to go the long way around town to give himself the inside run down at turns 15 and 16. Couldn't find it that time, but has got plenty of opportunity still just as we hit the session halfway. Meanwhile, looking up at the front here, we do see Labay has closed in the gap by half its current distance, and now you can see even closer by almost less than a car's length away there from Giovanni Badiali as we head in towards turn 19 and 20. So it stands right now just past the session halfway. It's Badiali from Labay, Tangre, Di Tosto, Simard and Vecare in the top 6. Quain, Martinez, Cecil, Peppers, Cox, Bourne and Sanchez in the top 13. And Ford, Green, Carr, Potvin, Veldkamp, Dupois and Black in the top 20. We do see there, as we just cut away and then back onto with the leading pair, 119 trying a fake out up the inside at Big Red on the 111. Couldn't find any room of it. You see here, this is for Vincent Simard, now sandwiched firmly between two British manufacturers, that being McLaren up over their nose, Aston Martin over their hind, on their way in towards sector 1. Now, where McLaren seems to have trouble in the opening sector, Aston Martin does not seem to have the same kind of issues. We see here, washing out wide is what's been upsetting the balance for the longest time for the 58. He's been able to manage so far in this race, but it's really definitely a case you can see in the way that car pitches around that he is approaching its braking point. He is pushing, and the car just can't take much more punishment. Aston Martin hanging out back. Chevrolet still fastest through that first sector. Down towards turn 11 we go. Meanwhile, we do just see off in the distance the 111 and the 119 still very close to one another at this time. In the slipstream on that McLaren, but it's a futile effort. The McLaren, a very rare example of a car faster than Chevrolet at their own game here. That's commitment to straight line speed might very well be their undoing, because you can see that the car is a little bit looser around the edges on the run, around the more technical areas of the track. That could be to Chevrolet's gain by the end of this race. 12.5 minutes left to go of race 1 of 2. Then we'll be on to the topic of race 2 not long thereafter. Cutting away from these two to go and catch on board with the fight of Bourne v Cox. Now we see Bourne well up and ahead of the 74. The 74 now having a prioritised defence away from Ivan Sanchez's McLaren. We see here with Sean Cox in the 74 in a spot of bother. Namely 12th on the field at the moment, and now having to fend off a chance to be within that top 13. You can see just hanging out behind him there, the number 91, the white and green McLaren of Ivan Sanchez. We see there to Byron Forrest in chat saying thank you for the amazing commentary and broadcast. You'll be sure to tune in on TRTN again at some point. It's been a pleasure being able to cover you through these series, Byron, and it's a pity that this is the way that things have come to an end, but we wish you all the best of luck in your endeavours and hope to see you again someday. Perhaps consider the Sunday League if you ever get the chance again. It would be lovely to see you return. Meanwhile, just to point this out, the number 1 of Martinez in trouble. So this is a curious case here. We see that Jorge Martinez ran into a serious spot of bother through turns 19 and 20. We see just up in the distance. Doesn't appear to be anything major in terms of damage so far. We'll get a closer look in, though, with that Porsche. This could be payday for Clinton Bourne as that gap is wiltering away. 3.5 seconds between the number 1 and the number 6 at this time. Not to distract ourselves from the current scope of things up over the front row, just to get another look in here with the 119 and the 111 at the forefront of racing today as we get into the last 11 or so minutes of racing. Meanwhile, out back of them, Simard still charging up towards the 58. DeTosto stands upon the grounds of a solid result in race 1. He can follow that up more than easily in race 2, now having already learned the basics of what the car needs and what it doesn't over the course of a 30-minute race. You can see there, tucked into the slipstream, just got him on the line and reeling him in. The base slowly but surely creeping into frame here from the point of view of Giovanni Badiali. 10 minutes left to go. So going to look on board here with some other fighting on the field. We see here 3 Mercedes cars at the back of the field, all going head-to-head. Dupois, Black and Veldkamp off in their own little world here. We see the world of the Mercedes cars. They are having quite a lot of fun here, so it appears, at the back of the top 20. You got to hand it to these drivers as well. I think they are ones that sneak under the radar a lot, because it seems that they're not the kind of drivers to be motivated by constant pursuit of, you know, oh, I have to be at this goal by the end of X month. I have to be, you know, I have to be in the top 10. I have to be in the top 20. These guys, I really do get the case. And you see it from the way that they throw the cars around on track. They're in it for the love of the game. And honestly, it's that kind of innocence that we need more of in sim racing. They are quite a fun bunch to observe there. Veldkamp, Dupois and Black in the Mercedes cars. So yeah, give an update there to one of the questions in chat, that being from TMX Phantoms, asking LeBay second. Yes, and only by 0.2 of a second, so we're really not too far off of a chance here of another engaged fight of the race lead. 9 minutes left to go. Badiali continues to lead and has led every single lap so far in race 1 of 2. Down to 20 cars left in this race so far. 9 minutes, now 8 minutes 45 left to go. I'll wait until the checkered flag to say what it is I'm thinking of saying, because I get the feeling if I do say anything about it now, commentary curse, real thing, look it up, is going to strike a quite nasty hand on this field. So looking into the last 10 or so minutes of racing then, we see this battle at the forefront of action at the moment. Badiali v LeBay, then behind them, David Tanguay third with the fastest lap so far. DeTosto up and ahead of Vincent Simard to round out the top 5. Dylan Vecchiere not too far away with Kevin Quaint in 7th place. Richard Cecil and Chili Peppers 8th and 9th now as Martinez makes his position known in the top 10. We see up on the inside though of Peppers, Martinez looking to get back into 9th place. A great lunge up the inside there. Plenty of room throughout. Martinez up to 9th, but how long can he stand to hold on to a position like this, knowing when it comes to the engine fight, the flat 6 in that Porsche 718 can't hold a candle to the 4-litre AMG V8 in the Aston Martins, as we see heading down Toward turn 12, Peppers was able to breeze on by, but under stopping power, this could be a changing factor between the number 1 and the number 24, hunting a switchback, and you can see it there was by millimeters between these two. In towards turn 13 and 14, Martinez looking to go the long way around, then makes it the short way as a double switchback, and he's back up in a position. My word, Martinez, what have they been feeding you today? In towards turn 16 and 17. Out through turn 17, you can see the 24 looking up the inside. So a great exchange we're seeing here at the back of the top 10 between Peppers and Martinez. Out towards turn 19, back onto the racing line. Very aggressive jump back in there for the number 1. Well done between those two there. That was a proper nice little spectacular racing we had between Porsche and Aston Martin. Still plenty left to go. Taking a look up through the order to see what the scope of things is like up in Sector 1 at this time. On to lap 10 of the 1 or 2 races today. LeBay still feverishly pursuing another race win. Now, to bear in mind, taking a look at the last couple of wins so far, this would be race win number 7 if he's able to procure it in the here and now. Otherwise, he'll have the chance in the next race to do so. For Battiali, he'll be hunting down his 2nd career win this season. You see these two getting closer and closer and closer. In the current scope of things, they've got maybe about, doing the rough maths here, about 3 more laps left in this race before we get down to that checkered flag. David Tangray looks to hold on to a nice stable 3rd, or maybe a little too unstable there on the exit of turn 11. Got a little bit cheeky with the curbs up on 2 wheels. But I suppose if we're going up on the logic of 2 wheels, I don't think much is going to be beating Barcelona this season. De Tosto 4th then, and still fending off his 4th place away from Vincent Simard. McLaren with a foothold in that top 5. Dylan Vecchiere, we can see just behind there with Aston Martin, looking at a solid result indeed for the number 161. Getting into that discussion as well, we mentioned it a few times before, but Vecchiere is still on track by looks of it here, just looking into our notes, for a top 5 appearance, and this looks to be the start of that new chapter. 6th place would represent his best result in the season so far in the number 161. That's if he can hold off against the 607 by the end of today's race. 5 minutes left to go. You take a look just briefly back on board here with the leading pair. Meanwhile, just to point this out, Clinton Bourne has now caught up to Chili Peppers for the control of 10th place. Meanwhile, Jorge Martinez has broken away by 1.9 seconds. So there are a few battles to be considered. We saw there a bit of upset out through turn 16. For the number 6, getting back on board with the leading pair here, as it does look like at a moment's notice the current power dynamic of the front of the field could shift at a moment's notice. Out through turn 1 we go, the 111 from the 119. Taking a look around the field here, just to try and catch on board with the leading car we see with Giovanni Battiali. We also saw just a glimpse in there to the fight with the 120 and the 58 getting closer and closer, so that may very well be our next priority at this time. Out through turn 9 and towards turn 10 for the leading pair. They currently show no signs of an imminent move on the horizon, but things much more immediate in the vicinity of the 58 versus the 120. We can see better exit out through turn 9, but turn 10 can be very deceptive there, so I had to pump the brakes just a tiny bit there, the 120. Otherwise, both of them would have been seeing a very very prompt visit, I should say, to the barriers. And again, this is such a bizarre sight considering how dominant Chevrolet has been in the straightaways all season, to see a car getting away from them rather than being caught up. Their one heel then for straight line speed has been that of McLaren. And today has certainly been their day. That's what's led to such a good performance by De Tosto. His luck finally catches back up to him. After a series of unlucky results, I'm imagining the 58 will be beaming ear to ear to see a result like this one today. Meanwhile, as we see here, Battiali versus LeBay. A momentary blip there for the 111 out through turn 15 and 16. LeBay has been incredibly patient at this time. These two very closely matched for pace. See there in the last lap as well, separate by 173 thousandths of a second in terms of their last lap time to the benefit of LeBay. These two coming up onto the penultimate lap of the race at the moment. So the next one they get onto will be its final here in race 1 of 2. Taking a look once again around the field before we get back onto the duel of the fates really here up over the front of the field between the two leading Chevrolets. You can see just how close things are between the 111 and the 119. Just quickly getting a glimpse in here. We see the current state of affairs from 4th to 5th. Simard losing distance over Di Tosto in a sudden turn of fate between those two. We see with LeBay v Badiali, we can see the 119 is sizing himself up for a lunge. Out through turn 10, in towards turn 11. Could he be looking at a chance here? We do see him start posturing over to the left, trying to force the 111 off of his tracks here. But if there's one driver, if I could say without a shadow of a doubt on this field, it is impossible to break his chain of concentration. It is Giovanni Badiali. So really, he's got to start throwing the kitchen sink into this next lap if he is to try and find his way up to race win number 7 this season. We see therefore LeBay gets up on the inside, lunges his way up round turn 12. The 111 around the outside will find his way to the inside at turn 13. On the exit of turn 12 then, into turn 13 and 14. Badiali onto the defence here. Parks himself on the racing line, forces a lot of that momentum out of the 119 as we make our way down towards turn 15 and 16. Let's get on board with these two on their way to the line then. On from the perspective of the race leader, Giovanni Badiali, as we head in to the final lap of racing. This is firmly in that fight for first place on the field here. 111 versus 119. These two have been absolutely super glued to one another throughout today's race as we head on to the final flying lap. 30 seconds against the clock, so it's now or never in the case of the 119 for race 1 of 2's win today.
Right, man. Leader is on the final lap. Give it all you can.
Watching with these two then as the gap starts to draw in closer and closer and closer. Separate this time around by just less than a tenth of a second. The 119 looks for it up the inside, forces the 111 to run the long way around, but fortunately at the second part there clips back onto the racing line. So that's actually backfired on the 119 at this time. Tried to force a wedge between himself and Badiali but couldn't find any dice of it on the exit of turn 1. You'll see, you can definitely start to see it already. He is hammering that 119 through these corners now. For the first time in this entire race, we just saw the potential for the back end to swing out on LeBay's Chevrolet. Badiali seemed to have been keeping a little bit of that potential in the tank for this very lap in particular, as we're starting to see a much more vibrant performance than in the last couple of laps here. Bear in mind, still working with relatively well worn in Pirelli, still off by 4 tenths to his personal best. Not that that's going to matter. His current priority is to keep that 119 in his rear view mirror as they make their way out through turn 11 onto the back straight then. Badiali versus LeBay continues to rage on at this time. In the background, you can see, just blurred off in the distance there, the McLaren and the 120 at the back of the top 5. Di Tosto versus Simard. There's also the consideration here of Cecil v Martinez in one of several fights on this grid. Martinez gunning for 8th. Getting a look on board, though, with LeBay v Badiali as we go running into the 3rd sector for the final time. These two have towed the line so close over the course of this race. Bear in mind, quite a few battles left to wrap up. This one leading the charge then through to turn 15 and 16 for the last time in race 1 of 2 today. And don't go anywhere. We get the opportunity to do this all over again for another 30-minute race at hand. Out through turn 17 and 18 then, on board with Badiali, who stands upon the precipice here to move into his 2nd career win in this series. Heading down towards turn 19, LeBay still in pursuit, but it seems at the final stop of it here in race 1, it's going to go in favour of the 111 of Giovanni Badiali. At the end of race 1 of 2 in round 6, the checkered flag flies here in Austin, and heading to the line, Giovanni Badiali back on the grid and back on the top. What a drive indeed in the opening of 2 races here for Badiali. Those two separate at the end by 2 tenths of a second. A remarkable finish between these two. Fielding in a fantastic fight indeed. Badiali then your race winner, but let's get a look on with the rest of the field. In the time since then, Tanguay 3rd, Di Tosto 4th, Simard 5th, Vecchiere 6th, Quain 7th. Here we see the three-way split. Cecil v Martinez v Bourne. Up round turn 20 we go. It could be a run all the way down to the line here. Very short run, though, to be considered. And down towards the line, very close margins to have been had there between Cecil Martinez and Bourne. 8th, 9th, and 10th. Peppers in 11th. Sean Cox crosses the line in 12th place. Ivan Sanchez, 13th for the end of this race by 1.3 seconds. We see on his first race here, Cal Ford in the number 484 inside the top 15. So the first landmark already reached there for the 484. Finishes up and ahead of Graham Green. What a result, though, by Giovanni Battiali. Took a break there over Valencia, comes back to the grid and wins all over again, just like he did in the Hungaroring. And the 111 could stand up on the chance of back-to-back victories here to make it 3 career wins in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series here in Season 2. Graham Green then 15th, Brandon Carr 16th, Didier Potvin in 17th, Andrew Veldkamp 18th, Christophe Dupois 19th, and Stephen Black looks at the chance of 20th. Bottom line, though, Battiali back on winning form after a breakthrough round 5. It's almost a pity then that he's had to take somewhat of a part-time season, as otherwise performances like this would have absolutely towed the line of a championship fight between himself and Christian Lebay. One can hope for potential championship fights in the future then between these two in Season 3 whenever that does come around. So I'm told that it is definitely going to happen, but currently no confirmations as to when. Oh, what a result then. Battiali wins in race 1 of 2. Lebay 2nd, Tanguay 3rd with the fastest lap, De Tosto 4th, Simard 5th, Vecare 6th, Quain 7th, Cecil 8th, Martinez 9th, and Bourne in the top 10. Peppers in 11th, Cox 12th, and Sanchez in 13th, Ford 14th, Green 15th, Carr 16th, Potvin 17th, Veldkamp 18th, Dupois 19th, and Black in 20th. So, don't go anywhere. We've still got the opportunity for one more race today before we go out on this broadcast here in round 6 of the championship. Taking a look back into the itinerary reveals 30 more minutes of racing to follow in round 2. We'll wait for the grid to form up, but until then, we'll be back in just a moment's time. So back onto the grid for the second time today, and again it's the same grid that we had back in qualifying. So taking a look, it's the same bar one exemption, that being the 824, sadly now out of this race, and from his official announcement just earlier on, out of the championship. He's thrown in the towel there, and to be completely honest, you can't blame him given what the last couple of weeks have been like. The worst kind of luck possible for Byron Forrest. And that's come to a close, sadly, and hopefully we'll hope to see him again in some other series, but this won't be one of them. So taking a look at the grid now, minus the 824, we find the following. Battiali still on for pole position, and Lebay 2nd, De Tosto 3rd, Tanguay 4th, Simard 5th, Vecare 6th, Quain 7th, Bourne 8th, Martinez 9th, and Peppers in 10th. Cecil 11th, and Sanchez in 12th, Green 13th, Cox 14th, Ford 15th, Carr 16th, Potvin 17th, Dupois 18th, Veldkamp 19th, and Black in 20th. So with just under 2 minutes then before the next formation lap, it'll once again be a charge away from the leading position for Giovanni Battiali. But the question there remains for the Italian talent, can it be 2 on the trot here in the circuit of the Americas, now having picked up his 2nd career win? Or is it a case here where, having learned his lessons from race 1, Christian Lebay may be sizing up race win number 7 this season alone? All questions we'll have answers for in the near future then. A minute and a half before the formation lap officially begins, we'll be catching on board with the onboard footage from the leading car, the 111 of Battiali, once again in about a minute's time. We take a look then onto the field. DeTosto definitely had a great turnaround chapter there, was pushed about for some time by the Chevrolets, was able to find himself in and amongst that fight in the top 5 still by the end of this race, albeit he missed out on his chances of that podium position courtesy of David Tanguay, but he was still able to have a very good fight with Vincent Simard. Dylan Vekere got his hands full at one point as well, and same story for Kevin Quain. And same story as well for Jorge Martinez. Definitely high hopes coming into that second race for the number 1. Same story also applies over to Peppers and Cecil, among several others. So we'll get on board in a moment's time then with Badiali, the leading car on pole position for the second race today, the second and final of round 6, before we get on to the discussion of the next round thereafter. We'll get on to that discussion after this race. Another 30 minutes then set to follow here in the Circuit of the Americas on what was actually a surprisingly good opening round of 2. Back on board then with Badiali, last race's race winner, looking to go double trouble here in the 111. And taking us away in a moment's time. Cleared for release then, the 111 will take us away over the course of this formation lap. Following on his trails, the 119 and the 58. So we see there the 6.2 litre V8 under the bonnet of the 111 come to life as he pulls away from the field. Question therein remains, can he handle the pressure of that second performance? He's already fended off LeBay once, so he kind of knows the 119's book of tricks now, at least here in the Circuit of the Americas. But is there more than meets the eye between these two? And I suppose what better car to be saying that of than the Camaro? Also, definitely to note then that McLaren, he learnt the mistakes of that race 1 start, was swamped in by the Chevrolets, and once they do find their way up to the inside, it's game over. So for him right now, I imagine for Timo DeTosto, we're expecting a much more elbows out start. He's going to be a lot more assertive on that field. I think it was kind of gauging what can he do off the line. More torque down range in the lower RPMs when we're starting the race off between the Chevys and the McLaren. So it's a losing gambit on engine alone. So he's got to be where the Chevrolets can't be, down towards turn 1. He's got to deny any and all access to that inside line, even if that warrants potentially compromising what would otherwise be an efficient line. He's got to get his elbows out, and he's got to start shoving cars out to one side. Not literally, of course, more figuratively. That would actually constitute quite a sizable investigation from race control. Down towards turn 10 and 11 we go then. Site of that major incident from earlier between the 616, the 747 and the 824. Now, according to witness statements from the 824, Byron Forrest, it was a case where the 747 just straight lined him down towards turn 11. And reviewing some of the notes we were given before his withdrawal from the series, it was a case where he was sideways on the exit onto the straight. In his words, he didn't even know what Green was thinking at the time. Well, I'd be curious to see that replay. Sadly, we didn't see it ourselves. Race control, I'm assured, has. It's going to be curious to see how that gets investigated, if at all. It's probably going to be the case then, if we are to believe the following, that Graham Green could be in a serious spot of bother with race control by the end of this round. He's starting from the pit lane though, and this is a bizarre change of fate for the 24. Chili Peppers, a driver set to have started in the top 10 with Aston Martin, now starts from the back, from the pit lane, mind you, and his run into race 2 today. In the case of DeTosto, I think his main priority right now is just to stay within slipstreaming range of LeBay. As we've seen already, the McLaren doesn't really struggle at all to keep wind with the Chevrolets. It's a case of if it breaks away from that slipstream, it needs that little shove to be the catalyst for its overtakes. But once it gets out into the open air, And moreover, once it gets out and ahead, it can open the line up massively down that 3/4 of a mile straight. That's what kept him so close in that fight in the top 5 for as long as he was, even amidst failing stability on the 58. So we'll see how all of this unfolds in the last of our 2 races here at round 6 of the championship. Back onto the double sprint format then proper, with the next round coming up, set to follow that before the season finale at round 8. Down towards the line then, the same grid from last. Heading down to the line this time, only 20 cars in the session, 10 on either side, technically 9 on one side, 10 on the other, 1 from the pit lane, heading down towards the line for the last time here in Austin. From the front, Chevrolet 1-2 again. How does it all play out? Let's find out then here in the circuit of the Americas. Without further ado then, here for race 2 of round 6, we're green and racing, and 3 cars dished a drive-through penalty. Among them is Giovanni Badiali. A disastrous start for the 111. We can see the remainder of the cars to have been dished out that drive-through penalty include Vecchiare and Cox. We see there off in the background, turned around, so I believe there was a multitude of cars, including Vecchiare. Get a look at this on the replay. That was a truly bizarre start. We see the grid start to filter in here. It has been disaster. So you see that was the 30. I think just was that the 30 stepping out. So Tanguay had stability concerns. And oh, what on earth is going on there in the data? Hang on, just give me one moment. A very bizarre blip in the data there. Momentarily showed a completely different order of vehicles, but now we see Badiali leading, but with that drive-through penalty. Lebay runs all the way out wide, though, at turn 11. What on earth happened for the 119? He forfeits position over to Vincent Simard, now takes up the helm of second place, with David Tanguay sizing up a chance here for a position inside of the podium. Meanwhile, further down the line, Quain Martinez, we see there Sean Cox had a great start, but sadly won a little too fast for the steward's liking. He is one of 3 drivers with that drive-through penalty, including that margin is Badiali and Vecchiare. See here for Di Tosto, things definitely getting a little bit more bizarre than the last race. Of course, caught up in that fray caused by the number 30 in some parts there. It's a surprise then, having stepped out and it created that domino effect in some part that the number 30 is effectively factory new there. There's very few concerns, if any at all. Meanwhile, for Lebay, he's now back up and ahead of Simard. Because of that, that does open up the gap here for Tanguay to come and have a go. Badiali, he stays in through turn 19. Is he going to come into the pits almost immediately? Yes, that does appear to be the case. Super late on the brakes here. He's got to play things very carefully. He does not want to get another penalty in this race because he knows now that his goose is effectively cooked. It does invite in the opportunity. Lebay takes the lead. Simard to second, Tanguay to third. These 3 separated by next to 0 from one another there. Number 74 now has a drive-through, still left to serve. Sean Cox stays out on this lap. We see there in the background that was the likes of David Tanguay trying his chances here up the inside of Vincent Simard. Simard runs out wide out through turn 1. Number 161 still has 2 more laps to serve. 2 more laps to serve that drive-through penalty. Meanwhile, we just saw there, great move for Tanguay up and around Simard, now up into second in this race. 111 has its drive-through cleared and leaving the pit lanes there. Now out past the number 39, I believe that is there. Actually, no, it's actually... Yes, no, it is out past the number 39. So down into 19th goes Giovanni Badiali. Meanwhile, we do see a promising sign here from David Tanguay. Now, in spite of the fact that the top 4 are all drivers for the same team, in this series where the team's championship isn't applicable, there's no real pretenses here for these drivers to hold back on any of their attempts to fight. So what does that mean in the moment? That means Tanguay can and possibly will get his elbows out here in the fight with the 119. You can see he's in the slipstream. He's definitely sizing up the opportunity now. He's not being anywhere near as aggressive as he would be to a driver outside of the team. He does hold some respect in that part then to Lebay and his fellow MRT drivers, but really that's got to be a habit he shakes here if he wants to gain position. He can't be affording to be so nice about the matter. We see the 74 in trouble. Yellow flags out for Sean Cox. Turned around at turn 12. Amidst this drive-through penalty, it's gone from bad to worse here for the 74 BMW. Now rejoins alongside one of the Mercedes cars there by looks of it with the current tow of vehicles. Car he just got passed up by there is the 616 of Andrew Veldkamp. Up the inside, we see behind him Dylan Vekere in the number 161. Meanwhile, the 74 gets down on the hammer there, tries to keep up and ahead of Mercedes, and that he does on the run through turn 17 and 18. That invites in Vekere, but bear in mind the 74 and the 161 both have drive-throughs to serve. Meanwhile, up at the front of things here, Tanguay and LeBay tangle for the lead of this position. The lead of this race, I should say, with Tanguay side by side with LeBay up the inside here on the 119 on the run in towards turn 1. The 119 very late onto the brakes. The 120 right behind and the 607 right with. So things looking incredibly interesting up over the front 2 rows of this race here. We see from Kevin Quain's point of view with Mercedes AMG now up past Simard to 3rd place. Mercedes almost immediately subjected to a retaliation there by Chevrolet. You can see he's already poking his way up the inside through the S's in Sector 1. Up in front of them there, the leading Chevrolets, LeBay and Tanguay, and we see they're stepping out wide on the run up through turn 8. Then through to turn 9, we can see things side by side here between the 120 and the 607, but back in front for that fight of 3rd place. For the AMG, though, on the exit of turn 10, he's looking increasingly vulnerable, so unless he shifts things over to the left-hand side, going up the inside could very well be the 120, but he holds off, lifts the punch there, and for the simple reason, it would be needlessly dangerous to force a move like that when all he has to do is keep his foot in the bulkhead of the car and let the 6.2 do the talking. As you can see right now, it's actually struggling to have anything to say, as this is the first time I'm sure Simard is this baffled to see Mercedes, normally a manufacturer that doesn't put up much of a fight in the straightaways, really held him at arm's length. So it's up the inside for the 120. The 607 almost immediately back to his quarter there, looking for a double switchback through turns 13 and 14, looks for it there, but as you can see up in front, the 120 parks it on the racing line and no dice of it. Meanwhile, there was a yellow flag down in the middle sector. We're curious to go and investigate here as we see things dissipate over the 2nd row. Looking up over the front row, however, tells us a broadly different story here. 119, only separate by 4 tenths off of Tanguay. Tanguay has been feverishly hunting a race win so far in this season. Looking just out behind here, we see Simard versus Quain. 120 versus 607. Once again reignited on that 2nd row. Much, much closer than their contemporaries up over the front. They're separate by half a second, where these two are separate by less than a quarter. So as it stands there after the first couple of laps, LeBay from Tanguay, Simard and Quain in the top 4. Ultra narrow margins between the front 2 rows down towards turn 1 we go. As it stands right now, Tanguay with the fastest lap of those 4. De Tosto makes the top 5. Martinez up to 6th place. Sanchez in 7th with Green in 8th. By the looks of it there, very late lunge onto the brakes down at turn 1. Risky business for Green. Bourne right behind him, his fellow Australian on the grid. And following him there, we see that's trouble for Cal Ford down at turn 1. What's gone on there for the 484 for him to have ended up in this precarious spot of the grid? Looking to rejoin there, you can see just emerging into turn 1, the Aston Martin of Chili Peppers. Down in 18th place, something direly wrong there with the 484. Is he able to get the car in operable condition? He's on his way in through Sector 1, so green flags are back out for the time being. You can see, though, definitely more wounds than just at surface level for the 484 at this time. So then looking further around the field, 12th place, now soon to be 11th for Andrew Veldkamp. We see here for Giovanni Battiali. He's hunting down his chances of a 10th place spot on this grid. Stephen Black liable to a position change there. You've got to hand it to the 707. There's actually been some pretty solid hustle so far. He's not too far off his chances of finding his way up towards the top 10 if more chaos ensues up front, and there's very likely to be the case in the next 21.5 minutes. As this 2nd race, you'd often think a lot of the drivers will have learned from their mistakes historically, but all it means is the drivers get so much more confidence in that 2nd race that often is the case where you end up with even more mistakes than the last one. It's a toss of the coin, as it were, as to whether or not you end up with a race where drivers have perfected their model for racing at this track, or they're even more confident, and that boisterous behavior is what leads to more incidents down the line. Either 4, though, we're here for. We're either 2. Trying to get onto the statement of saying either for it, but I think we just stopped at 4. evidenced by the fact that I'm slowly losing my grasp of English. You see here for Bourne v Green, recently having changed hands into Bourne's control of things for this hold of 8th place at this time. We see up the line there Martinez v Sanchez for 6th on the field. Porsche versus McLaren, a curious tale indeed, just shy of the top 5. We see here the two Australian talents head to head, the number 6 in the 747. One of a handful of a growing number of Australians on the field now, the other two being Brandon Carr, one of the newer signings, and also into this race today, admittedly having a little less than a happy time at this time, that being Cal Ford in the 484. These have been two of the longest running talents on the GT4 field here in Competizione Performance League. These two having clashed heads as far back as the early rounds of Season 1. So then, out past the first 10 minutes, this is one of a few battles we're seeing going on at the moment. We've seen that more recently, that fight, what was previously in for 6th, has now bled away from that of Sanchez chasing Martinez. Meanwhile, Richard Cecil picks up a drive-through penalty. And honestly, I feel like we may as well get it off our chest now. We were going to say at the end of race 1, I was surprised no one got a drive-through penalty, but now I do feel quite bad, and I feel like I have tempted fate with even suggesting that we would say that. And well, honestly, that is commentator's curse. If not completely evidence there, it goes as far as being subconscious thought that triggers these sort of events now. We here at TRTN will be reaching out for medium support in the near future, just in the case that we do end up upsetting balance of or whatever have you that would lead to such a case. We will be looking for experts on the signs of the esoteric to get in touch with us, to perhaps come and perform some kind of exorcism on our rig. Maybe sort some of the issues out there. LeBay from Tanguay still at the forefront of racing at this time. 18.5 minutes left to go. Meanwhile, we can see one of the closer fights on record at this time. 12th place, Brandon Carr versus Andrew Velkamp. Two Mercedes cars head-to-head here, but you can see, though, sizable damage on the 888 at this time. Behind them, you can see Stephen Black versus Didier Potvin. It's the 707 and the 35, both due an upgrade for position. Richard Cecil comes into the pit lane, so that brings Giovanni Battiali back into the top 10. Meanwhile, Timo de Tosto takes the fastest lap with McLaren. Getting a quick scope of things up at the front of the field. The 30 still separate from the 119 by about 3/4 of a second. Are we about to see an almost mirror match of the fight LeBay was once in this position for, with Battiali in the last race, now played out between LeBay and Tanguay at this time? Number 5 has its drive-through cleared. See at this time here, perhaps the rekindling of the fight in larger part now, with the extra feature of the two Chevrolets approaching from behind, being Bourne and Green onto Sanchez and Martinez for an all-out brawl for 6th on the field. Porsche, McLaren and Chevrolet head-to-head. Meanwhile, into the pit lanes at this time goes Sean Cox in the 74. He's been in the pits for quite some time, so it appears, and this may very well be a case that we've only just picked up on it, but it looks to be... We hope to see him onto the track, but this could very well be a case of a sort of a soft DNF where drivers get into the pit lanes and stay there for the rest of the race in the efforts to watch the rest of the fields go around in the same way that we do. So you see here the ongoing fights between Quain and De Tosto. Now, this is a curious one indeed, getting on board with either of these two to reveal the scope of the story so far. So on board with De Tosto, pursuing the Mercedes then, an unlikely matchup given how many Chevrolets have been getting into action with other manufacturers. To see some of them go head-to-head in their own respect reveals a unique side of things in what has been an era of Chevrolet dominance in Season 2. Out through turn 20, on board then with Timo de Tosto, what looks to be the proceedings of a fight for 4th between the AMG of Kevin Quain. You see just how bizarre the line is through turn 1. You've got to treat it very Very strangely, it's a V-shaped corner, and they're trying to find the shallowest line possible into the next. It does create these very bizarre-looking entry lines, but as you saw there for De Tosto, it was more than enough to keep him in pace with the 607. Again, this is the Achilles heel. This section here, we know that corner for corner, the McLaren is a solid motor. Mid-engined, gives it a lot of poke on corner entry. The problem is when the weight of the car is thrown so drastically side to side here in the S's, it's only the first couple of corners he sees any kind of advantage for, and this is where he has to start building into more aggressive setups. That's where you see the biting point on the differential, the percentage rates there go up and up and up, and that's what leads to these more aggressive setups that has been a bit of a hit and miss over the course of the season for several drivers of the McLaren, including De Tosto. But this is what makes it all worthwhile. You can see here in the slipstream right now, the halfway mark on the Mercedes. Bear in mind, whatever the 607 of Quain has been doing, he has definitely done some mad science to that Mercedes to keep it in such competitive stead. We saw how difficult it was for some time for the 120 to keep pace with him in the straights. Had to lunge up the inside to make that move stick over the number 607. You see that short shifting on the McLaren because he is fighting the differential for control. He doesn't want to get a little too enthusiastic on the throttle because we've seen it thus far to be the case. And just a few times over the course of this race alone where the back end is getting a bit squirrely here. He's having to play a lot more gently with this car, and that's a bizarre thing to do in GT4, a category where you can often be a little bit more on the lead-footed end and still get the times you want. McLaren then, a bizarrely precise tool in an era of hammers. Meanwhile, those three Chevrolets at the front, Lebay, Tanguay and Simard, it is worth noting they've been getting closer and closer and closer to each other overall, not just in terms of 1 or 2 positions, in terms of every single spot up to first place. We are likely to see, not too far from now, the great chances of a 3-way split for the race lead. The 74 drive through for Sean Cox then for track limits. So that's the second time he's picked up a drive through in this race. First one was for starting infractions. Now, pray tell, it would not be all too surprising if that's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that could very well bring out the chances of a DNF today then, out of the 74. We see here up the inside, round to turn 9, then around the outside. Well held there by De Tosto, found his groove in the second part of that opening sector into sector 2. We go then down at turn 11. You can see the 3 Chevrolets up in front here. We watch on over the dashboard of the 58. You can just see them up the road there, just disappearing off over the crest. Little dots there on the far end of the map. Those 3 separate from each other in almost equal stead, taking a look at it at the moment. There is a very likely chance those 3 could all go head-to-head for the lead of this race in the next 12.5 minutes. We're well past the halfway mark here, staying on board with the fight between De Tosto and Quain, though we're liable to move away to some of the other fights on track in the near future. I think definitely one that's on our radar at this time, Potvin v Peppers. 2 Aston Martins go head-to-head for control as it stands right now, a 14th on the grid. Otherwise, taking a look at it so far, Christian Lebay leads ahead of David Tanguay in second, Vincent Simard third, Timo De Tosto on your screens at the moment, recently up into 4th place, and now with the fastest lap, Kevin Quain in 5th place, Jorge Martinez in 6th place, and he's up and ahead of what was a recent change in position. They're up to 7th for Clinton Bourne, and Matt pushes Ivan Sanchez on your screens at the moment down to 8th when it next updates. Giovanni Battiali into 9th place, up and ahead of Graham Green to round out the top 10. Andrew Velkamp in 11th with Brandon Carr in 12th, and as we can see there, Stephen Black fighting with both Didier Potvin and Chili Peppers. Peppers up and around the outside, back up into 14th place, pushing Potvin down to 15th. Christophe Dupois in 16th, Dylan Vekere in 17th, Richard Cecil in 18th, and then we see Cal Ford in 19th, Sean Cox in 20th with a drive-through penalty in the number 74 BMW. So a very mixed bag here in this race, a lot of ups, a lot of downs. Where you would have expected stability, it has been anything but here in the second of 2, and we see recently there a change of positions for Bourne v Sanchez. Sanchez down to 8th, Bourne up to 7th. Bourne now sizing up his chances over Martinez. This could be, once again, their follow-up fight after race 1. And a very curious follow-up indeed. We see here with De Tosto v Quain, the current update of it, 2.3 seconds at the last interval. We see a new interval update coming in just a moment from now, 2.7 seconds. Meanwhile, Tanguay v Lebay, you can see the physical gap between them two at the moment, about 2 to 3 car lengths. at this time between the 30 and the 119. The 120 still very close by. Almost at equal distance there, just a bit more of a gap between second and third at this time. You see here, Sanchez v Badiali. Badiali on the warpath, mind you, as well. So for Ivan Sanchez, this is going to be a quite frightening sight here. We see on board with the Spaniard in the number 91 over his rear view here. This is in the fight for 8th place. Badiali, you can see, has got quite a great degree of confidence with his machine. Running out wide. I don't think Sanchez wanted any part of the fight that Badiali was bringing to his doorstep. And most recently, we see there a drive-through penalty dished out to Clinton Bourne. So for Sanchez, this is net neutral. He's not really losing anything by letting Badiali up in front of him. There's not the chance that he was be trying to get up into a fight here with Badiali at this time. He will give it a go if he thinks the chance is there. But this is a much more pragmatic decision we're seeing on display by Sanchez. He's hunting points, less so than moment-to-moment action here. And especially seeing how quickly Badiali has been able to pick up the losses he's had over the start of this race with that starting penalty and then get running with it. I don't think anyone could stand in his way even if they tried. Martinez, he's about to breathe a great sigh of relief here with Bourne about to take a drive-through penalty in the next 9.5 minutes. Could increase the gap exponentially between himself and the nearest car, but bear in mind that does clear a line between himself and Giovanni Badiali, so much in the same stead as what we saw there for Sanchez. This could be a moment of imminent dread arriving on the horizon for the number 1. Meanwhile, we see there ducking into the pit lane just from the brief rear view there of the number 1 goes into the pits, the number 6 of Clinton Bourne. Looking here in this sizable wad of vehicles fighting around 13th place. Chili Peppers fighting with Stephen Black, Dylan Vecchiere, Didier Potvin, and by looks of it there, the 39 of Christophe Dupois. Let's just take a look on board here with this enigmatic little fight here for Chili Peppers, fighting tooth and nail for 13th on the grid at this time. Now we're going to take a look around the field once again. We've got 8.5 minutes before the end of this race, but this is worth noting, just seeing the amount of cars here piled up towards the back of the top 13. We see the chance here as this does upgrade now to the fight of 12th place. Behind him is now the fight of 13th between Stephen Black and Dylan Vecchiere. We do see emerging up and ahead. Actually, no, this has now come back into being 13th place. As you can see, just having avoided losing that out is Clinton Bourne. I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves there. We see Vecchiere now up to 14th, Black down to 15th. Behind them, we see Potvin and Dupois catch on with these guys just a little later on. Let's go and catch on board, though, with the leading triad. LeBay, Tanguay, and Simard. Chevy 1, 2, 3 on the horizon here. The second time they've done so today. Tanguay, that gap is starting to grow slowly but surely on average over every lap. 7.5 minutes left to go. Is it a case where he's potentially trying to save the car for one last push, or is it a case where in his efforts to keep with the 119 his goose has been proverbially cooked and those tyres are just not giving him what he needs in the last chapter of the last race? More on that later on. You see, scoping around the field here, just to see where some of those nearby fights may be coming from. Another look in here between the fight going on now between a Mercedes and 2 Astons at equal stead of one another. Vecchiere, Black, and Potvin. This is for overall 14th place between these three. 15th locally for Black v Potvin, if that is to be a fight expected in the near future. So taking a look at the field in total, we see the following then. LeBay still in the lead, Tanguay second, Simard third. All three of those drivers very close to one another. Timo de Tosto gaining ground, but will it be by enough to find himself as part of that fight by the end of this race? He still holds on to the fastest lap. Kevin Quain in 5th, Jorge Martinez in 6th place ahead of Giovanni Badiali, now up to 7th ahead of Ivan Sanchez 8th, Graham Green in 9th, and Andrew Veldkamp in 10th place. Brandon Carr in 11th with Clinton Bourne rampaging from behind to 12th at this time, hunting down the number 888 after his drive-through penalty. Chili Peppers behind in 13th with Dylan Vecchiere hunting him down from 14th on the field. Stephen Black 15th, Didier Potvin 16th, Christophe Dupois 17th, Richard Cecil right behind him in 18th, and Cal Ford 19th, Sean Cox in 20th. Dropping then into the final chapter of things as we see that top 3 battle starts to dissipate away from control for the 30 or the 120. These two will be looking more locally at that fight for second as the 119 has started to carve away the gap at a fast rate of knots. 1.3 seconds in the last interval just gone. But Itosto, no gain of ground at this time. Still about 6.2 seconds as it stands. Not enough time left to gain. So he will be holding on to a top 5 finish, but he's held just at arm's length outside of that top 3. Looking into this fight here. Bourne v Carr, one to be expected, another one to be expected as well. Cecil v Dupois and Potvin v Black. See at this time though, the damaged Chevrolet of Bourne struggling to keep pace there with the equally damaged Mercedes of Carr. You can see just up in front of him there, that's Andrew Veldkamp. So the chances for Brandon Carr on his debut season here in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup to see his first top 10 are still absolutely on the table. Bear in mind his last 2 results, 16th and 18th for rounds 4 and 5. His first top 10 a meager 2.1 seconds away. And that becomes 1.2 seconds, so the hope is definitely growing here for the 888. Brandon Carr, still a very new signing to this season, may stand likely upon the chances to find himself up in a fight of 10th place. We see meanwhile though was an issue for Stephen Black, now down at 18th on the field, so that gives an upgrade here and then some as Richard Cecil gets up and around Christophe Dupois into the top 15 amongst the final 5 minutes of race 2. Peppers within half a second for a moment there of Vecre, but you can see in the time we were trying to take a look over to what happened for Stephen Black, we see that much to the same has bad luck caught up to that of Dylan Vecre. So too does that appear to be the case then for Didier Potvin. There's a big shake-up has gone on there the last lap and a half. You see then down towards the line, the gap between Carr and Veldkamp down at 9/10, but moreover Bourne to Carr is about 8/10. So the number 6 is gaining ground, and the chances for there to be a fight very close from now absolutely remain. We see the updated standings coming in there. Richard Cecil up to 14th, Dupois 15th, Vecre 16th, Potvin 17th, Black 18th, Ford 19th, Cox 20th. Looking at the interval timings, there is definitely something to be said here of the fight going on potentially for second in the near future. The 120 gaining significant ground in the last interval there between himself and the second place number 30 of David Tanguay. Vincent Simard still looking for a front row appearance, reveling from what was the successful ring of results back in the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series. Bear in mind, Tanguay has been feverishly hunting down a race win of his own for some time. Meanwhile, having a look in here, Clinton Bourne up the inside on Brandon Carr. Could there be the chance of a switchback for the 888 to tuck himself into the slipstream on the Chevrolet? We see there Bourne up to 11th. But what is the rebuttal by Chevrolet? Not by Chevrolet, sorry, by Mercedes over Chevrolet, I should say. In the background, we see looks to be some action there. Peppers v Cecil. On board with Carr just briefly here down towards turn 12. We're coming up onto the final lap not far from now. We're onto the penultimate lap as it stands there. Lap 12 of this race led by Christian Lebay. As for Brandon Carr, he's found himself in an unfortunate spot here because with Clinton Bourne up over his nose, the chances to catch that Chevrolet are starting to slim out. But bear in mind, there is hope still. A fight there as he tries to get up the inside. He's held up by Andrew Veldkamp. 2 minutes left to go. Quite a few battles left to be wrapped up. Among them, we see is the Aston Martin. So let's just get a quick look across the whole grid of the fights currently going on. So you have your fight for second place, Vincent Simard versus David Tanguay. Tanguay defending, Simard attacking. Further down the line, Carr v Bourne. Bourne defending, Carr attacking. Previously the other way round. Behind them, Cecil v Peppers. Peppers defending, Cecil attacking. Further behind them, Vecre v Dupois. Dupois defending and Vecre attacking. Looking briefly up the line here, we do see for the 888, the number 6 and the number 616, 111 dished out another drive through. So after all of that, after the painstaking drive back up into the top 10, it has all fizzled away. under the incredibly airtight track limits at this circuit. You want to know why it's not got a good rap in the Assetto Corsa Competizione community? Well, now you have your answers, because with the track limits being this precise, this rigid, and unwilling to compromise, has now in turn compromised the race of Giovanni Badiali. When you take a look at the track limits in NASCAR, you see how well they're able to abuse that last 2 corners of the track. You wonder where it all went wrong for GT4's regulations. Meanwhile, we see here Born v Veldkamp. He now actually drops in behind Carr and Veldkamp. So in the time we were covering there for Badiali, we now see having dropped down through the S's. The number 6 now out past the 888 that now gets up and ahead of the 616. So Brandon Carr, as we enter the final lap of this race, is now up to 10th. And will be furthermore up to 9th as it stands, with that drive-through penalty by Badiali. You can see here on the exit of turn 19, ducking into the pit lane reluctantly so. A day perhaps to forget then for Giovanni Badiali. Had 1 race win back under his belt. That second race has been anything but pleasant. Sanchez then will move up towards 7th place as we enter that final lap. Bear in mind, still left to be wrapped up here. Those 3 Chevrolets we still wait to see down towards the line. They're currently down in Sector 1, leading that charge, LeBay. And then we see that close fight at hand for the remaining podium positions. It's an MRT 1-2-3 for the Chevrolets of LeBay, Tanguay and Simard. Definitely something to be noted, though. I think we are gunning here for the best result so far for Jorge Martinez. We've seen him on the climb here in the ranks of Competizione Performance League's local ranks through both GT4 and also GT3 over at the Real World Racing Day. We saw Watkins Glen International where he took the AM category win. Really, this has been a long time coming for the number 6. We see in his last spur of results, he did see a top 10 in his opening round back in the double sprint at round 3 of the championship. But for Martinez, this has been a long time coming. The first of a solid, proper top 10. Not just scraping at the back, firmly in and a part of it there. Not too shy of a chance of a top 5 on the current set of performance he's had in this time. Seeing here with these two on the final lap. 120 and number 30 still gunning for position here, but still heralding the arrival of the 119 in through Sector 3 at this time. Meanwhile, a wad of regime changes inside of that top 10 at this time. We see Chili Peppers and Richard Cecil getting into arms there. Andrew Veldkamp behind them. Up in front of them looks to be Brandon Carr, just forced out of a chance by Bourne of a top 10. Number 74 with another drive-through penalty. He can't seem to catch a break. We see in the background here fighting between Tanguay and Simard. But as we catch on board just in a moment's time here with Christian LeBay heading down through turn 20 at this time, sees the checkered flag appear almost immediately as he hits the line here at the end of race 2. LeBay wins in race 2 of round 6. A very closely had podium there with Tanguay second, Simard third, Timo de Tosto with the fastest lap for 4th. Kevin Quain makes the top 5. Jorge Martinez sees his best result of the season so far, barreling down through turn 20 with Porsche for 6th on the field. Ivan Sanchez coming to the line also for one of his best results of the season, if not his best. Taking a look at it, yes, it is a series of best results for both Martinez and Sanchez, 6th and 7th as they make their way to the line. Graham Green makes his way to the line from 8th on the field. Giovanni Badiali to the line from 9th. By the looks of it there, by a considerable gap as well over the rest of the field. It makes you wonder, how is it he's been able to do so many drive-through penalties and still emerge in that top 10? That's raw pace. 111 to the line, 9th place at the end of this race. Clinton Bourne then rolling down towards the line out of turn 19 in towards turn 20. For Brandon Carr, it will be a frustrating end to what could have very well been the Australians' first top 10 this season, but it will be Clinton Bourne to the line for 10th place, Carr in 11th. Richard Cecil close behind there for 12th place. Even closer behind him was Peppers and Veldkamp, 13th, 14th. Dylan Vekere for 15th on the field. So it appears they're down towards the line. Goes Vekere for 15th and Christophe Dupois for 16th. Didier Potvin for 17th and Stephen Black for 18th. Cal Ford in 19th. And Sean Cox there from the pit lane in 20th place. So then your 2 race winners over the course of what has been a fantastic saga of racing here at the Circuit of the Americas was Giovanni Badiali and Christian LeBay. It was Badiali's 2nd career win and it was LeBay's 7th this season. That's just in local terms, but what a race that's come to be. Well, not really much left to be discussed at that time. Two different race winners, but of course the same two that we've seen from earlier on this season. Still yet to see a brand new name then onto the charts after LeBay and Badiali. One does wonder, where could that come from next? Well, with only 2 more rounds left to go in the championship, the amount of time we have left to answer that question is running short. Next round coming up, round 7, will be at Snetterton on the same double sprint format, albeit could very well be with the return of the shorter 10-minute qualifying sessions as opposed to the extended single 20-minute we had on the unique rule set for round 6 today. Then the season finale coming up on February 24th. That'll be February 25th at 1 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time for our British viewers. But that's when we go live from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to bring about the end of the saga here in Season 2 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League. Brought to you by Malwa Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert and live via TRTN. That's all from us here for the time being. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.